Okay, so on that note, it is super, super hot, so I'm really sorry that I look shiny, but it's all good. We're gonna have fun. All right, let's see. So hopefully you guys can see my entire screen. And I'm gonna go see what questions we have to start off with. It looks like we do have some questions. Wait. Okay, so I actually thought you guys could see the questions that I was answering when I did a class on Thursday. So I guess you guys didn't. So I am going to read the questions now so that you guys know what I'm answering. Just give me a second. Alrighty. But lots of people are saying hello. I'm also being asked what you would have to do to continue taking this class, and if there's any kind of promotions or discounts for this class. Honestly, guys, I don't know. I'm a consultant, so I just come in, I teach, and I don't really know about any of the logistics. That I believe is a question for Michael or any of the admins at the Portnoy school. So I would really encourage you to email or to call them and find out. I honestly don't know. Yeah, I to be honest, I don't even know like what this class costs or anything like that. So sorry. Good to see you too. Yes, hi. Okay, perfect. So what I'm gonna do is let me just shut this down, hide everything that we don't need to see. All right, so let's pop open our PyCharm. We'll get started. I think what we're going to do is we're going to start with, I'm not going to do all of the homework, obviously, but I do want to talk about it a little bit. So essentially for the homework, those of you who reached out to me, I asked you guys to create a very basic, it's another interview question, essentially. Very basic function that calculates number of seconds in hours and minutes, and also to test it. Now, in my experience, when you go to interviews, sometimes the interviewer will ask you to test your code, sometimes they won't, but it always impresses if you do, regardless. So I think if you just kind of go into the interview with the mindset of you're going to write your test first, at least the very basic, positive test, and then you're going to implement your function, and then you're going to do some more tests to consider some negative scenarios. Or if you even before you start implementing it, you think of some negative and positive scenarios you want to test, and you write those first. I think that goes a long way. Lots of companies are now very much into test-driven development and unit testing and just testing in general. So you as the kind of, I mean, we used to be called automation QA, but now there's so many names for us. So I guess like SDET or staff development test engineer or something like that. There's lots of names for it now. What we are is essentially a hybrid. We are developers, but we write programs for testing rather than programs that we sell to the customer, right? So it's a program to test the program. But you are developers, so test-driven development is still a very big thing. So I do encourage you to still follow this process, even if your interviewer doesn't ask you specifically to do that. So on that note, I'm just going to create a very simple Python unit test file right now so I can do the homework solution with you guys very quickly. And then we're going to talk about some of the things you might have considered or at least thought about. And I'll kind of go through this as if this was my interview. Sorry, guys, 1 second. Thank you. Okay, perfect. All right, you guys. what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in the chat for our class, the attendance sheet. And I'm also going to put it in Slack. Slack. So regardless of where you want to do it, if you're considering taking this class for the entire 60 hours, then I would add your name to that spreadsheet, just so you know we know that to expect you, and it won't be held against you if you change your mind later. But at least we know the capacity. Bear with me, you guys. Just going to post this link as I promised, and then I'll be back to teaching. There we go. Okay, perfect. So Python unit test, we give it a name. So let's call it calculate seconds. Now, for some of you, this might seem like a very long test name, but honestly, it's not a big deal. You don't have to worry about it. You can make names very, very long. Nobody's going to come after you for doing that. It's better for it to be descriptive rather than ambiguous and nobody knows what is going on, so they have to read the code. People don't want to read the code. They want to look at the name of the test and know exactly what's happening. So some of you sent me their homework solutions, and I thought it was really well executed. I like to do the same kind of situation. I like to put my inputs and my expected outputs at the very top of the test, and then to actually do the the testing. So my inputs are going to be and then so 3 minutes plus 60 minutes, so that's 63 times 60, right? So I am not going to try to do this in my head, you guys, which I probably should, but oh well. 3780 is what we're getting here. All right, so 3780 is what I expect in terms of seconds. And then, of course, I'm going to call my function, and if you want to, you can actually say actual seconds here, and then call your function. So, or you know what? I'm going to do this, get seconds. That's what I'm going to call it. Because lots of times when we want to get something, right, we call it a get. So get seconds. And then we are going to provide our hours and minutes as parameters. So there you go. And then we expect the actual seconds back. Now, as you can see on the bottom, we have a red line. If you hold your mouse over it for a bit, it will actually ask you if you want to use IDE to create the function for you. So if you just click on that, it will actually create the actual header for you. Now, because I didn't put self in front of it, it created it outside. But if you put self in front of it like this, and then you do exactly the same thing, come on, show up, then it will create it inside the class. So that's the only difference, right? So if you put self dot, it means it belongs to this class, and we learned about self last class. And if you leave self off, then it means that it belongs to the module, doesn't belong to the class, so we'll create it outside the class block. And before anybody asks me, is there a preference to where to put this function? No, there's not. So during the interview, you can put it outside the test class, inside the test class. I would ask the interviewer, I would say, are we, assuming that this function resides in a different module, or are we assuming that this function is, part of this specific class? And they will give you the answer. Let's go over the definitions again. So when I say the word module, right, I use the word module, I'm actually referring to this file. So it's just a Python speak for file. If a file is a py file and it happens to have Python code inside, it's a module. So anytime you hear me say the word module, I'm essentially saying file. And anytime you hear me say package, I'm essentially saying folder. Just, Python speak. Okay, so here we have our test set up. And then here we are going to start filling out our function. So the very basic thing we would think of the first, right, is a positive test case. So what do we need to do? We need to take our input hours, right? And then we are going to do what? We are going to multiply it by 60, right? And then we are going to add the number of minutes, correct? And then we're going to take that in parentheses and multiply it by 60. Now, is this the only way to do it? Absolutely not. You can also do it another way. You can say hours times 60 plus minutes times 60. Do that as well. Perfectly fine, perfectly great. So whichever way you did it, it works. But this is what I'm going to do. And then, of course, you want to save it. Or if you wanted to, you can immediately return it. Right? So you can either return it immediately like this, or you can save it in 2 seconds and then return seconds. Again, your preference, how you want to do it, but essentially this is what's happening here. So now I'm going to go ahead and test my function. So I'm going to test my expected result against my actual result, and then I'm going to go from there. So this is, the most basic thing we're going to do, right? Test passes, yay, we're halfway there. Now, as a good tester, then you want to come back and you want to consider all the possible things that a user could mess up, or all the possible things that necessarily a user would mess up but are ambiguous, right? And here, you don't want to assume. So during the interview, you want to keep asking your interviewer questions. For example, I'm looking at hours and I'm thinking boundaries, right? Boundaries. So does this mean that we can't have negative hours? Does this mean that we can't have more than 24 hours? Because then after that, maybe we should have another parameter called days. So I would ask your interviewer. I would say, are we going to assume that you can't have negative hours? And then if we are assuming that it is okay to have negative hours, how are we going to treat that situation when you have positive minutes and negative hours, right? Because it's not difficult to multiply a negative number, but if you supply something like 60 minutes and negative 1 hours, then the result will be 0. So you want to know how to handle that. And your interviewer will also usually tell you, what they expect from you. However, in this case, I would assume that you can't have negative hours or negative minutes. I would assume that, they only have to be positive, which brings us to our next kind of, part of the lesson. So this wasn't part of your homework. This was something that I challenged people to consider. But if you did consider it, then awesome. Let's, and if you actually found the solution for it, even better. But let's kind of talk about some of the possibilities of what we can do. So first things first, let's consider some of the other tests that we can do that would be negative, right? So let's rate them. So we're going to have one test that is, I'm not going to write too many because honestly, we can go down a rabbit hole with this. But I just want to, show you some things you can do. So let's do test 0. Let's say minutes, for example, right? Test 0 minutes. Oops. And then, of course, I'm just going to copy this because I want to. No, let's do. Okay, so I would input -3 for minutes, 1 for hours, and then here is where we pause and we ask our interviewer what he wants to happen. And there's 2 possible things that could happen. There could be a friendly situation where you get back a result, but it's either in the form of a message or it's none. Or there could be a less friendly situation, which is actually a lot more common. And that's if you supply a, an incorrect input and you get back an error. Okay, so which one do you guys want to cover first? How do you guys want to do this? You can do either as an answer or you can do it as you can just speak up, whichever you prefer. Everyone's shy today. Sorry, reading answers. Okay, nobody's responding. Hopefully you guys can hear me. Can you guys hear me? Hello.
I can hear you. I don't know.
Good. Everyone's shy. All right, I guess I get to choose. Meanwhile, I am reading through the questions, and one of the other question is to show that shortcut again. So, and people also want to start with the friendly way. Okay, sounds good. So let's do that. So the shortcut. The shortcut is anytime you declare anything like a new function, for example, self.say hello, right? Hello. Oh goodness, what is up with my typing today? All right, then if you wait just a little bit, it will either turn orange if it's inside, right? And if you hold your mouse over it for just a bit, or if you click on it and you wait just a bit, you'll get a bulb, right? So you have two options. You can either hold your mouse over it, which is what I prefer, and then you get this little kind of pop-up thing, and you can click on the add method, or you can just click on it and wait a couple seconds and you'll get a bulb, and then you can select it as one of the options. Now, if this is not an inner function, meaning it doesn't belong to the class, right, not a local function, then you will get a red underline. But the same kind of situation. You can either hover over it and just kind of wait for a second, and you'll get the option to create it, or you can click on it and wait for just a moment, you'll get a bulb where you can select to create the function. So can you be more specific? What do you need me to explain? Sorry, somebody's asking me a question. Okay, so let's do negative, right? So negative is when we put in 3 minutes that are negative, we want to get back a message, right? And that message should be something along the lines of, improper input, right? Or let's do something like, the provided input, and then we want to show what input the person provided, right? In quotes, 4 minutes is not valid. Please enter a positive number. Okay, does that work? And then of course over here, we want to put what it is that was invalid. So for example, -3, right? So we can do this manually like this, or we have another option. And this is where we use that format function that I showed you last week. And I said we're gonna learn about it later. So it allows you to substitute a variable into a predefined sentence post fact. So in other words, it would look something like this. All right. And you would just say dot format, and then you would specify your minutes inside here. So what happens is the format function is going to take whatever's in parentheses, and it's going to use that to replace anytime it finds curly brackets. Okay, so here we have the provided input. And so instead of the curly bracket 0 curly brackets, it's going to take minutes and it's going to put it inside here. So the actual sentence will read, the provided input, -3 for minutes is not valid. Please enter a positive number, right? So there you go. And then what we would do is we would also take the same situation here and we would put it inside our function. We'll come back to it in a second. And so we would be actually comparing the expected, it's not expected seconds, expected, let's say, call it message. Right? Expected message equals actual message. Sorry. There we go. So we have now two tests, one positive, one negative. In the negative test, we are trying to test out a situation where a negative value is being passed in. And so in order for us to trigger this message to be returned, we first need to find out if the condition is being met, right? And so notice how I say if the condition is being met. So in Python, we have if statements, okay? And if statements allow us to ask a question and get an answer in the form of yes or no, or more specifically in the form of true or false, all right? So in this case, we can ask a question to see if this amount, the one that's going to be stored inside the minutes parameter, is less than 0. Because if it's less than 0, it means it's negative, and then we would send back the following message, all right? So what would that look like? We would say if, right? And then we would ask our question. So what is the question? If is minutes, right? Is minutes less than 0? That's what we want to know, right? Is minutes less than 0? And if minutes is less than 0, we're going to put a colon, and we're going to answer our question. We're going to say what to do if that's true. So if minutes is less than 0, we are going to return this message, right? So we're going to say return okay. Does that make sense to everybody? So in other words, we're not actually going to do the calculation of minutes and hours, right, to convert them into seconds. We are going to immediately check if the input is good, and if it's not good, then we have none of it. We're just going to return the message. We're going to say, no, we don't care. Now that's one thing we can do. So we can be friendly and just return a message. Now, obviously, you would have a similar if statement for hours, and you would say, hey, is hours less than, or 0, or is it not, right? And you would return a similar message except with hours over here instead of minutes. Okay. Sorry, lost my train of thought. There's also the unfriendly way. So for minutes, I'm going to do the friendly way, and for hours, I'm going to do the unfriendly way. All right, so just bear with me. So if you don't want to be friendly, if you want to be more along the lines of what Python usually does, so for example, let's do something like this, right? So the length function can be used on lists or any kind of collections and on strings. It cannot be used on numbers. So as you can see, when I passed in a number into the length function, that is invalid input. And so what happens is it throws a type error, okay? It throws a type error and it says, no. This is not okay. You can't use that, right? So I think that would actually be the more correct way to handle the situation, not because it's better, but because it's more in line of what Python would usually do, right? So we basically follow the monkey see, monkey do concept. If in Python everything else does this, then chances are we want to follow the same pattern. So how would you do this? It's very similar to this if statement, but instead of returning a message, you would actually raise an error. So you would say something along the lines of if hours, right, is less than 0, and then you would say raise. And here you actually have all kinds of different errors that you can choose from. And in fact, if you just type in the word error, you will get an entire list of options to choose from. So you don't actually have to come up with your own. There's plenty. And you can, pick whatever floats your boat that day. So, I mean, in this case, I would say either type error or you can probably use not implemented error, or I mean, I think type error is the best in this case. So you would say type error. And then if you wanted to, in parentheses, you can provide your message, right? So you basically would provide exactly the same thing right here, but as an error, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first run this and show you that the expected message comes back if you pass in negative minutes. And then I'm going to create a second test with negative hours and show you what happens if you do negative hours, okay? So here we go. First things first, I'm going to set a breakpoint, and I'm going to run this in debug mode. Okay, so as you can see, I have minutes declared as -3. You can see that on the bottom. I have hours declared as 1. You can see that on the bottom. And right now, when I click on the step button, right, that we learned last week, this string over here that says the provided input and then the quotes and curly bracket 0 is actually going to get converted into the full message using the format function, where the actual -3 is embedded into the string. So here we go. You can see that happening here. All right, the provided input, and then you actually see these slashes, but they're not really there. They're displayed by the debugger, but they're actually not put in there. It's just the debugger, because debugger uses single quotes. They're showing that they're escape. So anyways, just ignore the little slashes. It's a little weird thing that PyCharm does. So this message was converted, right? It was taken by the format function, and the format function removed the curly brackets, and it inserted the value inside the minutes variable. So not the actual word minutes, it inserted the value. See, if I hold my mouse over it, it says -3 is inside there. So it actually inserted -3 into the placeholder. Okay, and then of course, after that, you get your actual message back, and you can see that they're completely identical. Sorry, I'm moving the box up and down so I can see, right? They're completely identical. And of course, then the test passes. So everything is great. Everything is groovy. Everyone's happy. See, test passes. Okay, now let's talk about what happens if we have a function that we're testing that actually throws an error, right? Because we also need to know how to handle that. So I'm going to take this test. I'm going to duplicate it. Okay. All right. So now minutes is going to be 1. Hours is going to be, let's pick a number, -5, for example. And there's not going to be an expected message. Okay. Well, I guess we can keep the expected message. But instead of saying actual message, what we're actually going to do is we're going to do a try and then except block. Try except is kind of like a safety net. All right. So you're going to try to do something. We need to replace minutes for hours and get seconds function for hours. I don't understand what that means. We need to replace minutes.
Sorry, let me explain. If hours less than 0, and then in the message we have minutes.
Oh, yes, because I copied and pasted. You're absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah.
So thank you. You're right. Okay. Sorry, that's what happens when I copy paste, but thank you for keeping me honest. I appreciate it. Good QA. Right on.
Format as well. Sorry. format
Format
minutes,
function as well.
format
You're
hours.
absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Am I good now? Where my QA at?
Yeah, perfect.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Awesome. Okay. I mean, even if we don't catch this, when we run our test, it will catch it for us. So that's as good. But I usually catch all of my mistakes after I run my code. Okay, let's do this. So we have a second condition. So if ours is less than 0, we're going to raise an error, right? So we're not going to be returning anything. We're going to be raising it. And when something gets raised, right, what happens is it usually aborts the entire process. So that's what we saw happening in our Python console, right? We enter the command, and when the error was raised, it aborted the function. So nothing else happened after that. So what we want to do is, because we're testing this function, we don't want the function to kill our test. So what our test is going to do is it's going to try to run this function, and we're also going to accept the fact that there's going to be an error thrown at us. So we're going to catch that error. We're going to accept that error. So here's what it's going to look like, okay? We are going to, I'm just going to put myself a little room. We're going to say try, all right? I'm going to try. And then see how there's a colon? What you might have already noticed in Python is whenever you see a colon, it means it's the beginning of a block, right? So it means it's the beginning. So you see that happening with classes. You see that happening with functions. I don't know if you noticed, but when we did an if statement, we had a colon. Again, that's the beginning of the block. Same thing here, colon, beginning of that. That means whatever's inside, whatever has to be tried, right, inside that block needs to be indented. So we're going to indent that next line by 1 tab. And then once we try it, we want to add an except, right? Except. And again, we're going to put a colon. And we are going to say, well, if something gets thrown at us, right, if an error gets raised, we are going to catch it. What are we going to do then, right? So in this case, I'm not only going to catch it, but I'm going to say, what I'm trying to catch. So I'm going to catch type error, and I'm going to give it a name, for example, E. I'm doing something wrong, you guys. Hold on a second. What am I doing wrong? I have my cheat sheets, so I'm just looking at my cheat sheets. Sorry. That's not really what I want. Okay. Hold on. Okay, you know what? Hold on. Let's do this, and then I'm going to look at my cheat sheet some more, because I'm not finding what I wanted to actually do with you guys here. Anyways, so you would accept the type error, and then you would say, that the test passed. Essentially, you would say yes, it's supposed to have this, and it's going to fail, and that's good, right? We expect it to get a type error. What I'm not seeing is a way to test the message. So hold on, it's not letting me do what I want. Bear with me. Okay, yeah, I did it correctly, and then I got frightened. Okay, as E. Okay, It's not just E, it's as E. Okay, and then to test the error message, we would say string E. Am I doing this correctly? Because now I'm nervous. Yes. And you would do self.assert equal, I shouldn't have deleted it, expected message, and then comma, this guy. And I'll explain this in a second, sorry. I kind of lost myself for a moment, and now, okay. So let me just try to make sure that this is working correctly. And then we are gonna go through it step by step. Oh, okay, that's that whole copy and paste issue that I'm having. Okay. Okay, perfect. All right. Throwing checked exception. Raise type error equals throwing checked exception. It's not an exception, it's an error, but yes. Okay, so let's go through it. I'm sorry I muddled it for a second there, but I'll take you through it one more time. All right, so we covered the friendly way of dealing with a situation when the user provides invalid input, and that's just to return a message, right? But not to abort the process. But that means that the user have to then check whether the response they got was a number, seconds, or whether it was a message. And if they don't check, then they could potentially get into problems. The other way, it's not as friendly, but it is programmatically, I guess, more in line with Python, right? Correct, is to raise an error. And in this case, we wrote or we modified our function that if the value provided for hours is less than 0, right, then we are going to raise a type error. Now, how do we test it, right? In order to test it, we want our test to pass. We don't want our test to be aborted. So when we call a function with bad inputs, we are going to immediately expect it to throw an error at us. And so we are going to catch that error. And first of all, by putting what kind of error is going to get thrown. So by saying except type error instead of just saying except, right? But saying except type error, we're immediately narrowing down what type of reaction our function is going to have, right? So that by itself is already very similar to an assert, but we can also check the message that the function returns. So if you have a function that can throw multiple different errors or multiple different types of errors, and that is completely possible. And in fact, even you as a QA, if you ever do API automation, your API could actually throw multiple different errors at you. Then you would know how to deal with this. All right. So when you're doing API automation, when you try to establish a connection, you could actually get an error thrown at you, and so you would do a try catch. When you're just using regular, you're just using the requests package, for example, and you try to send over some data, or try to receive back data. If it's badly encoded, you might get an error. So you want to be able to deal with all kinds of situations. So we're going to try to call our getSeconds function. We're going to still pass in our inputs, which are hours and minutes, right? But we're going to know that this is going to result in an error. So because we know it results in an error, we're going to immediately write an except block. We're going to say we expect to get back type error. And when it gets back to us, we want to catch the message of the type error in the E variable. And then you can run your assert statement, assert equal, on that E rather than on the expected message as we did in the previous test. So hopefully that kind of made sense-ish. I think it's very important for everybody to know how to handle errors. So I think, I mean, basically that's why I wanted to go through this with you guys in class. So we have 2 different situations. All right, let's think of something else that our code may get as input that may cause it to fail. Can you think of another situation where the input is not valid? It's not that it's negative, but what are some other things that could possibly happen that would be not good? Yes, exactly. Elena knows the answer. Anybody else wants to try to answer that one? I'm not going to say the answer yet. Yes. Well, a complex number, can you expand on that? What do you mean by a complex number? So yes, that's true-ish, but depends on what you mean by that. And Vlad, yes, you're right. Okay, no other takers. All right, so I got a few answers now. Good. People are getting braver. So a character would definitely be a no-no, right? Like that's a self-explanatory. Another possibility is we can actually get a number that is potentially like just a very large number, like larger than an integer. Or we could get a decimal number. So again, when numbers are large or where they're, and we're talking very large, like more than, I forget what is the exact amount, I think more than 50 million or something like that. Then we might have a little bit of an issue in terms of calculating and storing things. Python is smart enough most of the time to allocate more memory in order to store the number, but then you get some rounding errors, so that might be a problem. Characters are definitely a thing, so we're going to actually account for that. And floats, so non-integers, decimal numbers are actually called floats in Python. And again, that's not that it's going to cause the code to fail. It's not, but you're certainly going to receive an answer back that's not really what you would have expected, right? So I don't think that's necessarily invalid input, but I would create a test for it. So on that note, let's go ahead and create a test for it very quickly. Again, I'm just copying and pasting, so keep me honest. So I'm going to say decimal hours and minutes. And I actually meant to call this hours, not seconds. So decimal hours and minutes. And then, of course, for minutes, I would maybe put something like 2.5. And for hours, I might put actually, I might do something like this. So here, this is 2.5 minutes. So we know that that's going to be 150 seconds. And for this one, because there is no like a nice, I mean, I guess I could do this in a nice way. I could say 0.8, right? But you can actually do the calculation. You can do a fraction, and then your Python will actually convert your fraction for you. So this would actually equal 0.8 as well. And then you can say how many expected seconds you expect to get. So let's see, 150 plus, trying to do this in my head. You know what? I'm not going to try to do it in my head. I'm just going to leave it as a bad answer and then figure out what it's going to be later.
48 minutes.
388?
48. 48.
48. Okay. Thank you. All right, so here we go. We're going to pass that in. We're still actually expecting everything to go as planned. We're not expecting anything crazy to happen. This test should just work. So I'm just going to run it. Oh, interesting. Okay, yeah, it's definitely not 48. Apparently it is 3030. Here, let me do my own calculation. One sec. So it's 0.8 plus 2.5, 2.5 times 60, and then 0.8 times 60 plus 60 plus. Wait, something is wrong. What am I doing wrong?
$11,880.
No, that's too much. No, it is 3030, so you guys can see. So 3030 is my expected result back. So there we go. Anyway, so see, it works. So, but it's good to have that kind of test. At least in the interview, you want to consider all the possible inputs. So this is fine, this is fine. Some of the other things you might want to consider is just providing a 0 for one of these, like 0 hours or 0 minutes, so on and so forth. Okay, so why did we do all of this? So we have a nice, good combination of tests. I'm going to leave this one out of the conversation for now. Let's just consider the first three. So the first three, if you look at them very carefully, they essentially look the same. Wouldn't you agree? It's input, input, expected output, and then you're getting the actual output, and you're performing an assertion. And assertions are all the same. It's always assert equal, right? Assert equal. So wouldn't you agree that this code, it looks very similar? Like all three of these tests look exactly the same? I mean, I think you do, right? So you would agree that they all look very similar. So what I wanted to talk to you guys about is a way to make a data-driven test, all right? So data-driven tests are tests that don't actually have any inputs or outputs inside the actual test. The inputs and the expected outputs come from the outside. The actual test is only the meat, right? So that's the actual calculations and the assertions, but there's no data inside. Data comes from the outside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you two ways to do it. One is to convert a single test into what is called a parameterized test, and the other way to convert the entire class into the parameterized test. So to convert a single test, what I would do is I actually would copy any one of these because they're all identical. And so I would say test calculate seconds. I'm not actually going to even say if the test is going to be doing a positive test case or a negative test case. I'm also going to remove this part. So it's not going to be part of this inside. This is all not going to be part of the test inside. So it's not here, it's gone. All right. And then all that's going to remain is this line, actual seconds, and the call for hours and minutes. I'm going to show you in a second where those are going to come from. And then I'm still going to have my assertion inside here. All right. So that means at this point, there are three things that are underlined in red, right? Three things. And somehow I need to pass these into the test. So when I need to pass something into a function, how do I usually pass things into a function? There's two ways. So what are the two ways to pass things into a function? Do you guys remember from last class? I'll give you a reminder. So this is one way. Huh? Go ahead.
We need an input?
Well, not an input. We need a parameter, right? So one way is this, right? Through a parameter. And the second way is through self, right? So there's two ways, through the inputs and through self. So that's what we're going to do here. So our test is going to have parameters, right? So it already has self. We're not going to do the self method right now. I'm going to show you that later. But here we are going to use the parameter option. So we are going to actually provide 1, 2, 3 parameters into this test. And those parameters, as you can see, are the ones that are underlined in red, right? Because we want the red to go away. So those parameters are going to be hours, minutes, and then expected seconds. There's also an option to provide a fourth parameter. It's actually not going to be used for the actual test. It's going to be used for naming of the test. Because if we provide multiple sets of data, we want a way to differentiate between the different sets of data. So we can name our sets of data things. So for example, we could say something along the lines of, positive minutes and seconds, right? Oh, excuse me. No, I shouldn't do that. Let's call it test. I'm jumping ahead of myself. Let's call it test name. And then the next one is going to be hours. Next one is going to be minutes. And next one is going to be expected seconds. Okay, there we go. Are you guys still with me? So I removed the inputs from inside the test. They're gone. And instead, I'm going to pass them as parameters into the test. And we're going to talk in a second where those parameters are going to come from. But because they're now coming into the test, I can use the same bit of code to essentially rewrite all three of these tests. So all three of these tests right now, I can combine into one. All right, I can completely remove these, I can comment them out, and I can combine them into one. All right, so I'm commenting them out right now because what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert all three of them into just one test and have it be parameterized. Now, before we can do that though, we're going to need to install the parameterized package. All right, just like unit test is a package, just like request library that we installed last week is a package. To do this next step, we're going to need to install the parameterized package. So let's do this. Import parameterized. All right, import parameterized. You guys good? Now, once you write this, chances are it's going to get underlined in red. Okay. And if you click on it, it's going to give you the option to import that package. Hold on, let me delete mine so I can do it with you guys. Yeah, let me upload my calculate seconds PY file. Sure, no problem. Let me just finish installing this parameterized and then I'll upload it. Huh, it's not letting you guys do that. Interesting. Why isn't it doing the import? Okay, if it's not giving you an option to import, because for some reason it's not doing it for me, go ahead and remember the route we took last week. So if you're on Windows, you're going to go to File, and you're going to select Settings. Your Settings option is going to be somewhere here, right? File Settings. And then if you're on a Mac, go to PyCharm Preferences. And then you should have something like this, right? You should have a Preferences window open. So what you want to do is you want to go to Project and then Project Interpreter. Okay. So one more time, File, select Settings if you're on Windows. If you're on a Mac, PyCharm, Preferences. And then go to where it says Project, Project Interpreter. And you're going to click on the plus sign. So again, for Macs, it's on the bottom, but for Windows, it's actually over here on the side, right? So for Windows, it's blue. It's a big blue plus sign. For Macs, it's on the bottom, and it's a small gray plus sign. So click on it, and you're going to search for parameterized, right? Parameterized. So not nose dash or not parameterized model, just simple parameterized. Nothing before it, nothing after it, just parameterized. So you're going to select it, and you're going to say install package. And then just wait a few seconds for that green banner on the bottom. You want that green banner. So as you guys can see, I have that green banner on the bottom. And after that, you should be good. So you can just press OK, and you're golden. Okay. All right. So I was asked to upload this file. So let me just make a copy of it. Unfortunately, I have to rename it to TXT. Otherwise, go to webinar is not letting me share it. So just bear with me. I'm going to call it doc because TXT apparently it also doesn't like. And then I'm going to share it as a handout. Where's my handout? Handout. Again, I'm sharing it as a DOC doc, but when you download it, please immediately change the extension to PY. The only reason I'm changing it to doc is because GoToWebinar does not let me upload PY files or TXT files. So I have to change it into doc or PDF. So, you know, it seems to be like the lesser of the two evils. But you are quite welcome. Okay, here we go. Now that we created this test, we are going to supply all kinds of, I'm actually going to show this to you. Here we go. So this is what we just installed, parameterized, right? It's a project. And as you guys can see, it comes with documentation and some examples. So this is what we're going to be doing. See, we have the similar situation. We have a unit test case, and we have a test that we're trying to use parameterized for. So what we're doing is we're going to say add parameterized dot expand, and inside there we can specify all the different types of data for every single test. All right, does that make sense? So that's what we're trying to do. We're going to say parameterized dot expand. I don't know why it's not completing, but it is what it is. You might need to say, I don't know why it's not auto completing. Ah, okay, I see why. You guys, apparently you have to change it to this. They were a little bit tricky. So from parameterized, import parameterized. You can quickly copy and paste. Actually, I'm surprised that nobody asked me about these things yet, right? The from statements and all of that jazz. So this is essentially a package name, right? But when I say from parameterized, import parameterized, this is essentially a module, right? So from this package, import this module. So what happens is if we actually go and look at the site packages, let me see if I can actually do it. So see, inside my site packages, I installed parameterized. And then when I click on it, inside it, there's another parameterized. That's why it repeats itself twice. Does that make sense to everybody? So they called the folder and the file inside it the same name. That's why it looks so weird from parameterized, import parameterized. So we are going to import this. We're going to write this statement, and we're going to say add parameterized that expand. And then here, because we have multiple tests, right, or rather multiple sets of data, we're going to supply a list. Now, do you guys remember what lists look like? If you forget, you know, we pop open Python to console, and you can do any kind of string, right? A, B, C, D, E, F, right? And then you can say dot split, right? And you can see what a list looks like. So you guys see, it starts with an opening square bracket, and it ends with a closing square bracket. And then inside it, we list out values. The same thing's going to happen here. We're going to start with a opening square bracket, we're going to end with a closing square bracket, and here we're going to list out values, right? Now, because our values is not 1 per test, because our values are 4 per test, do you guys see what I mean by that? Why I say 4? We need to bundle them together, all right? We can't just list them out because then unit test won't know which values are, should go with one test and which ones should go with the other one. So what we're going to do is we're going to bundle them together into another set of parentheses, okay? Round parentheses. So what we can do is we basically can do this, right? That's one set, that's another set, that's a third set. So far, so good? So again, add parameterize, that expand, and inside it, we're going to supply a list. That's what the square brackets are for. And each value inside that list is going to be bundled into round parentheses, okay? We're going to group the values that go together per test into their own little, package. More specifically, in Python, when we use these round parentheses, it's a tuple. We're creating a tuple. So not only are we providing a list into this expand function, we're actually providing a little tuples inside that list. Now, did you need to know that? Probably that's too much information, so I wouldn't stress too much about it, but I figured I'll call your attention to it so at least you know specifically precisely what you're doing. If it helps you to think of it as just, just like in multiplication, we're just, grouping things together, then, by all means do that as well. We don't need them at different levels. It's just easier for you guys to see that we have opening and closing things. So that's why I structure them that way. You can totally do them in one line. I'm just trying to make it cleaner to see. But yeah, one line is fine. The question is, why do we need to put brackets in different levels? It's just me. Just me. You guys can do whatever you want with brackets. That actually doesn't matter. Okay, so looking at the tests we commented out, right? And knowing that the first value is going to be the test name, the second value is going to be hours, third one is going to be minutes, and the last one is going to be expected number of seconds. What do you think should go into our first parentheses? What do you think? So what should we call this first set of data? Well, you can actually copy this and put that as the first parameter, right? That's the test name. And then you can put a comma and you can look at this test again and say minutes, right? 3, that's going to be your second. And you can look here and say hours, 1. And then you can look at expected seconds and put that here. Or rather more specifically, yes.
Sorry, looks like we need hours first and then minutes.
Oh, did I mess it up? Yes, thank you, sorry. Thank you.
Thank
you. Okay, does that make sense, right? So how about you guys take just, a tiny bit of time and go ahead and convert the second test and the third test into these, sets of values. So go ahead and then I'll catch up with you guys. Just take a couple minutes. I just want you to kind of get into a habit of how it would look like, and then we can do the rest together. So I'll just 2-3 minutes for you guys to do that. Alrighty, so I kind of started ahead anyway. So we're gonna have 1 and -3. And then the last one is going to be this guy. All right. So that's what happened. We now have 1 test, but it's actually going to get executed 3 times when we run it. Now, there's upsides and downsides to this kind of implementation. As you guys can see, the tiny little downside is that I'm not able to use the format function and to say that format minutes because I'm passing this here and it's not a variable here. It only becomes a variable once it gets inside the actual test. So that means I can't refer to this number. So I have to actually hard code the number, but that is fine. That's a very minor little thing. Another downside is that's not really a coding downside, but more of a user experience downside, is that I am no longer able to run this test using this button over here, okay? I'm not able to run this test individually. The only way for me to run this test now is from the class level. So before, you were able to click the little triangle right next to the test name and say run. That's not gonna work anymore. See, no tests were found, it fails. Instead, now you actually have to go to the class level and say run from the class level. And then, when you do that, magic happens. As you guys can see, exactly 4 tests were executed. Now, you might say, why 4 tests? There's 3 here. Well, there's 3 here, right? So that's actually 3 tests. But then we also have that one that we didn't comment out, which is -hours, which is the try except portion. So there's a total of 4 tests. And if you look very carefully, you will actually see that the magic, right, that it did, where it took the test, it numbered them, but it also concatenated the test name to the test. So you can actually see test calculate seconds, non-zero hours and minutes, decimal hours and minutes, and negative minutes. So you can, if something fails, you can figure out pretty quickly which of the tests went bad. And here, I'll actually break one of these in order to show you what that would look like usually. Okay, fine, that didn't work. I'm gonna have to break it harder than that. I'm pressing all the wrong buttons. Sorry. I didn't mean to do a debug. I wanted to just run these, but pressed the wrong button. Fine, doesn't want me to break it that way. How do I break it? Let's break, let's put a little decimal here. One more time. So there you go. See, if you break one of the tests, it will literally show you which test, and you'll be able to figure out which set of data by the test name. If you didn't have the test name, it would be a lot harder for you to figure out which test data actually failed. So that would be kind of bad. Okay, any questions?
Ellie, could you please upload this file?
I just did. Did you not get the handout? Or do you want me just to replace the previous one?
Yeah, to replace the previous one. Like, yeah, the previous one was without this parameterized part.
Okay, doing it.
For some reason, my test is failing. I don't know. It's
doing it now.
Looks like
Doing it now. Okay. Let's see if it lets me do it.
You don't mind to show again where the from parameterized coming from? That part exactly.
Yeah, hold on. I'm doing all the wrong things right now. 1 sec. Let me first try to drop this. You know what? Hold, let me just delete the previous calculate seconds because now I don't know which one I uploaded and which one is the old one. Okay. Okay. So you have both now the way I have them. Unfortunately, if I copy and paste it, that actually, so somebody's asking me, would it be easier to just copy the Python code and paste it into the chat? It's going to lose formatting. And unfortunately, because Python is very picky about those indents, remember how I showed you like even one space can really break it? You guys would hate me. Like you really would hate me because it would take you forever to try to line things up again. So they're all formatted correctly, and that would actually cause you more pain than help. So this is the best way to just convert it into a doc and to upload it as a handout rather than copying and pasting the Python. That is pretty painful when I do that. For you guys. For me, it's easier. But okay, so does that, do you guys kind of understand then how the parameterized testing works? Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, well, what about this last test? Can we bundle it in? You absolutely could. Now, the question is whether you should, right? It's not whether you could, whether you should, because it's kind of a different beast, right? These ones are your boundary testing, but they're not specifically negative. Nothing falls down, nothing explodes, right? Usually when we think of negative tests, like bad things happen, so to speak, or at least kind of ish, I guess. So I don't know, you might want to have this one separate. However, if you do still want to have it as the same one, I would do something along the lines of adding the try and accept to that other test, which is what I'm going to do right now. Again, I don't necessarily think you should go that far and make everything parameterized, but if you really want to combine the two beasts, I'm going to show you how to do it. However, I'm not specifically a fan of this one, so just take that as it is. Why aren't you working? Am I pressing the wrong thing again? Sorry. What did I do? Oh, sorry, I forgot to put a comma. That's what's happening here. We need a comma. Yeah, so see you guys, commas are important. Okay, there you go. Okay, so I am able to combine these two into like one block. So what would happen here is I would use my expected as either the expected number of seconds or as the expected error message or as the expected friendly message. Either way, it just becomes expected. It's not expected seconds anymore. It's just expected. And so depending on what the situation is, it's going to be used. So now even this test has been converted. So even that one can actually go away. Again, I'm not sure you want to combine everything, but if you really wanted to, it is always a possibility. You just have to massage things a little more. All right, so I'm thinking, I'm going to give you guys an early break. Any objections to that? I usually do it like a little bit later, about 8:50. But I feel like we start a new, we're going to start talking about WebDriver and requests, and I don't want to get interrupted right in the middle. So are you guys okay with taking a, let's do 20-minute break right now? All right. Right. So actually, I'm being asked right now if I can cover, I can talk a little bit more about class, method, and function. I definitely do that in this class and in other sessions. I kind of promised you guys on Thursday that I would also cover a little bit of WebDriver today. So you have like a sampling of everything we're going to cover in this class. So for now, I'm just going to leave it at that. But definitely throughout the future 60 hours, we would talk a lot more about all those things. We would talk, like I said, about making abstract classes, abstract methods. We would talk about functions and how to pass in what we call args and kwargs, how to make optional parameters, method overloading and overriding. Well, not, there's really no overloading in Python, so overriding in Python. You know, everything really, and also as part of actually building out tests framework. But I guess I kind of want to still finish WebDriver today, so I don't want to spend time on that. Anyways, so 8:35, please be back by 8:55. You guys, I'm going to take 10 minutes first, and then I'll come back and I'll have 10 minutes to answer questions. So I'm sorry, I need to rest my mouth, too much talking. So yeah, I'll see you back at 8:45 if you have questions. If you do not have questions, I'll see you back at 8:55, and that's Pacific time. Okay. See you soon, everyone. Okay, guys, I'm back. So you guys have any questions, let me know. Absolutely, I can do that. Give me a second. I actually decided to upload my PyCharm and, oh no, never mind. It's letting me do it. It wasn't letting me for a second, but there you go. Can you see the whole thing? Like that? You are quite welcome. Okay, guys, I'm just reading a book, so if you guys have any questions, go ahead and ask me. Otherwise, I'm going to give it another 8 minutes for people to take a break.
Ellie,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take advantage and ask you a question.
Of course.
So, having like kind of ground zero in Python and a little bit or some background in Java, can we say that, take the kind of analogy and say that that self is kind of the same thing like we would instantiate in Java using new keyword, instantiate the class?
Right, so there's no new keyword here, but yes, we can instantiate a class by calling to its constructor. So it looks exactly the same as Java, except you don't use the new keyword. You just call the class directly and you pass whatever you need to do to the constructor in the parentheses. And then
No,
in
no, no.
Java,
What I'm trying,
the constructor has the same name as the class. Here, it just called it init.
okay, but what I was thinking that that self is kind of analogy for that new when you instantiate. You I believe you mentioned that you instantiate in by that self we instantiate the function, the method.
If you're trying to find the best match for what self is to Python, it's the same as this is in Java. So in Java, when we use the keyword this, right?
Oh, okay. Here we go. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Now it makes sense to me. All right. Thank you.
You are quite welcome. So somebody is asking me if I can just share the entire project in Dropbox. You guys, so those of you who decide to stay on after these 2 first sessions, I usually create a Git project And then you guys, I invite you into the Git project, and I use Git to share all of my stuff. So I basically push into Git, and you guys can pull. You can also make your own branches and push your code and have me review your code that way as well. So you can actually ask for reviews, and I will review your pull requests. So basically, we're mimicking the real working environment where we have a master branch, which is me, and then you guys are the developers who create your own branches and get your code reviewed. The only thing we don't do as in the real world is we don't merge your code back into master because I already have a copy. So there's really no reason to have another copy from everybody. But that's something we do. No idea how to pay for this class. I don't, I'm being asked, how do we pay for the class? No idea. I'm, like I said, I'm a consultant. So I don't know. I don't know how the whole enrollment process works, or the payment process, or how much it costs, or anything really. What I can tell you is this class is planned to be 60 hours. It's going to be Monday, Thursday. Right now, I'm not planning to take any days off, but usually when I do, unless I'm sick or one of my kids is sick, usually I give you guys a good heads up. Last session, I had to cancel a class last minute because I had a family emergency. But other than that, I think that's only happened like twice within the last 10 years that I've been teaching. So usually I give you a good heads up if I have to move a class to a different, or cancel it and just do it a different day or something like that. But, yeah. In the real life, do you run your tests headless, or you open browser and everything runs and you can monitor it? So it depends. These tests that we're running right now, they're not web driver tests. So the browser is not really, it doesn't really play a role. But in, if you're creating a web driver tests, then obviously you do have that option. And at that point, it's really up to you. You could run them headless. There is, it's HTTP unit driver, HTTP unit driver. But, and that's headless, but I usually don't. I actually like to be able to run through a real browser and be able to take screenshots of any failures and to be able to just, have all of that for documentation purposes. But yeah, I usually don't run it on my computer. In the real world, you wouldn't run the test on your computer. You only debug them on your computer. It's actually a CI, something like Jenkins, Hudson, Bamboo, Circle CI, any of those. It's going to run it for you. We've done Docker in the past. We've just done it plain desktop in the past as well. I've done a very complicated architecture where we boot up Amazon instances and provision Jenkins slaves and do all kinds of parallelized test execution with using Selenium Grid. So yeah, I've done it all, but certainly if you wanted to use Docker, you could. Oh, interesting. Somebody just put the link with the price for this Python course, I guess. Let me share it with you guys. Because I don't think everybody else can see it. Yeah, so it was one of the students that gave it to me. I don't know how, like, I haven't looked at the link myself, so just, if it's the wrong one, don't kill the messenger, please. Okay, just one more minute for people to get back, and then we can continue. Oh, okay. Okay. Apparently the link was given by Michael in the chat. Thank you for sharing. So should be good if Michael is the one who shared it. Okay, let's keep going. Yes, I hope everybody's back. I think we basically beat this one, to its completion, into submission. So I think this is good. I'm going to go ahead and close it. And then let's go ahead and before we move on to WebDriver, we started request demo last class. So I guess I kind of wanted to do this one little last brush stroke on it before we move on to WebDriver, just to kind of show you some of the things you could do, because I just did the most basic assert on it, which is to see that it's positive, but I kind of wanted to show you other things you could do with it, possibly if you needed to. So let's spend about 15 minutes on that, and then we can move into WebDriver. So go ahead and pop open a request demo if you have it from last class. If you do not, let me actually make a copy of it as well and share it as a handout. Again, I'm going to share it as a doc, so make sure when you download it, you change it to a PY. Hold on, let me just handouts. Apparently, I'm only allowed to share 5 handouts with you guys, so I'm trying to keep it lean. Okay. I already shared 3, so it's limiting me. Okay, so here's the test, and it's very basic, very small. And we have a breakpoint, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it to the breakpoint again, and then I wanted to show you guys how you could take that either content or text that's part of your response and convert it into, well, essentially convert it into HTML, or more specifically, decode it, I guess, essentially is what I'm trying to say here. So you would convert it into a structure that you can actually then massage. So let's see. Here is the debugger. It's stopped at the, after the response. So the response has already been received. It's stopped at the assert. And as you guys can see, there's a lot of things that come back. I kind of wanted to also point out some additional things. Sometimes when we make a request to a specific URL, we get redirected. If you get redirected, you will actually have this history will be not 0. So every single hop that your response had to go through. So for example, you requested, I can't even think of something. You requested google.com and you can put www. Well, what would happen is you would get redirected to www.google.com, for example. And so when you get redirected, you get a 301, and all of that would actually be here in history. So every single URL you went through in order to get the final page, you would see in history. And it would look very much the same as this. So all of the separate sub requests would be tracked for you. So you can actually drill down and see all the web pages you went through, all of the data that got passed back and forth, all of that awesome stuff. Additionally, if you look very carefully, this is the response, right? So we're looking inside the response. Hopefully you guys still with me, right? So this is the response from the request. But inside the response, there's actually information about the request that was used in order to generate the response. So if you're sending over a request and you're not really sure what on earth you're sending and you're very curious, maybe because you're calculating some of the data, maybe because the data is coming from another third party, and you wanted to see what it is that you actually sent in order to get the response that you got. You can unfold this request that is a copy inside the response object, and you can see what you had for the body. You can see what the user agent that you were sending was. You can see, any of the parameters you were passing in, which URL was being used. If there's any kind of data, you would see the data. Right now we got a get, so we didn't send any data over, but you would see, the data as well. So anything you wanted to see, you would see as part of this kind of sub object inside your response. Now, I do want to kind of point out that right now, when we are sending over a request, our user agent is being set to Python requests. All right. So if you want to simulate or test using Python while you're doing API automation, a situation where it's actually a Firefox browser making that request. So in other words, you want to fool your server that it's not Python, that it's actually Firefox that's making that request, or it's not Python, it's actually Google Chrome that's making that request. You would actually have to update this user agent yourself, which is very, very easy to do. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. So that's one thing that I wanted to talk to you guys today about. Second one is, once you get back this text, right, what do you do with it? Well, this text right now, it's always going to be a string, by the way, but sometimes this is going to be JSON, and sometimes this is going to be HTML, right? So in this case, it's not JSON, it's HTML. If it was JSON, then you would have to convert it, all right? So you would actually say JSON.dumps, and that would actually convert it into a series of lists and dictionaries, or rather, dictionary has lists and embedded dictionaries inside it. So it's like this multi-level, complicated structure. But because this is not JSON, this is HTML, how do you parse it? So you can either parse it as XML, or what I like to do, and this is just kind of a simple thing, what I like to do is I also like to save it into a file. So when I'm debugging, I can actually view using my own eyes, what it is I got back. Because right now here in the debugger, it's very hard to tell what I got back, right? It doesn't give me much. So while in this class, I'll also show you how to eventually take that HTML and convert it and to be able to parse it using, XPath or CSS to be able to extract things out of that HTML. For now, I'm just going to show you how to write it into a file so you can do it with your eyes, right? And you can use the network tools in your browser on it. So here's how you would usually do it, okay? I'm just going to go ahead and make a couple more, empty lines in my test. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say open, all right? And so in Python, open is a built-in command. In other words, you don't have to import any additional packages for it. You don't have to install anything additional for it. It comes with Python. It's one of the most basic functions. And in fact, see, when I wrote open, it actually tells you it's one of those built-ins. This is actually the package it comes from. So built-ins, it's the most basic function. And it also tells you what you need to pass in. So you need to pass in the file name, right? And then you also need to specify which mode to use. So are you going to read this file? Are you going to write into this file? All that jazz. So I'm going to put brackets, round brackets, parentheses, and I'm going to specify the name for the file. So in this case, we'll call it result.html. And then I'm also going to open it up in write mode, okay? So by default, the open command works in read mode. So if you're just opening a file for reading, if you just want to read it, then you don't need to do this. You would just, say open, and that's it. You don't need to do anything additional. And I'm going to say file equals, so that I'm opening a file, but the pointer to that open file is going to be contained in the variable called file. Probably not the best name, but it's fine. It will work. I don't remember if I have to use write or write lines. We're going to try both and see which one works best. So we're going to say file.write, and we're going to say response dot text, right? And then we, of course, are going to be very nice, and we're going to say file.close, because it's always good to clean up after yourself. So anything we open, we want to close. Sometimes it's difficult to do this if you're doing it as part of a loop of some kind or anything like that, but there's also a different way to open this file. It's open with, and And I'll show you that in future sessions, essentially, if we get that far. So this is what you do. And then you just run this test. So let me run this quickly. And as you can see, did you guys see that? So my test ran really fast. It generated result.html. Now, because I didn't put any path inside here, I just said result.html. It put it into the same folder as my test. If I actually want to deposit this into a different folder, then I have to specify the path. But because I just put the name of the file without a path, it goes into the same folder as the test that's executing this code. So after that, it's as easy as just popping this open. Okay, fine, maybe not that easy. You have to right click and say open, and then in browser, and you can specify which browser. So for example, I can say Chrome. And so you can see this is actually what my test gave back to me, all right? Now, obviously, there's going to be some broken images because when we make a request from our browser, we don't just get back the HTML response, we also get all the CSS and all of the PNGs and all of the JavaScripts, JSs along with that response. But here, when we're doing API testing, we only get back the raw response. We're not actually getting all the images with it. So that's why this image is broken. Any questions? W stands for write. So we're opening a file for writing. If we wanted to open the file to read content back, then we would do R, right? And then there's also a different option, which is X, stands for execute. Now, all three of these letters actually come from like a Unix background. So in Unix environments or Linux environments, you specify permissions on any file or folder using RWX. So read, write, execute. And this is the same kind of pattern. So Python follows that kind of Unix, Linux, I don't know, schematic, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. Any questions? So what I like to do is usually when I'm doing any kind of API testing or automation, when I'm getting some kind of HTML back, I usually like to, get it and write it into a file and then just, maybe examine it with my eyes when I'm debugging. Or later on, I'll show you how to take that HTML and convert it and be able to basically use either CSS locators or XPath locators on it in order to find specific elements in that HTML, specific items in that HTML. Now, we haven't covered yet what CSS and XPath mean. So if those don't mean anything to you at this point, that's fine. I don't expect you to know what they are. Literally right after I'm done with this file and I start talking about WebDriver, I think you'll be able to figure out what that means pretty quickly. So, but anyways, so any questions about this? All right, hopefully that all made sense. And now you guys also know how to write content into a file if you ever need to, right? Or to prove to a developer that everything is wrong and here's the bug. This is also very useful. So if you, you ever go to a developer and developer is like, well, I can't reproduce it. You can say, well, you can't reproduce it, but here's the, the source for the HTML. So you can play around with that. You have your source and they can figure out what happened. Okay, so that's part one. Part two, I told you, what would you need to do to actually do a user agent. So for a user agent, the easiest thing to do is again to use the inspect. So here, let's use this inspect. And then you go to network tab. Come on. Sorry, my computer is being extra slow. And you can go to any URL. Honestly, it doesn't even matter, any URL, because all requests that are going to go out of your computer, every request you make through your browser is going to contain the same user agent. So you just want to make any request. You can even refresh a page. It doesn't matter. So any request, and then you're going to scroll down to where it says request headers. And one of the very last ones is going to be user agent. And so you just copy it. I mean, you can actually right click on it and just say copy. And it will copy it for you. So you can go back to your Python and you can say things like user agent. Oops, that didn't work. Hold on. one more time. Actually select it all the way. And copy. Oh, come on. Copy, please. Copy. And then go back. Paste. Okay. So now you have your user agent. And so what you want to do is you want to create a header. So you're going to say header, because that's what it is, right? That's where we copied it from. We copied it from headers. So you're creating a header. And this is going to be the first part of the header, so user agent, right? And that's going to be the last part. You're going to say header equals, and here essentially what we're creating is a dictionary. So far we've created lists. We've actually a little bit played around with tuples. I mean, you guys, I told you they were tuples. You didn't really do much with them, but you knew they were tuples because they had round parentheses. We played around with lists. You knew that it was a list because it had square parentheses. Now we're creating a dictionary, okay? So a dictionary is a little bit special. It's also a collection, but it's a little bit special because instead of items in that collection being using an index to identify which item, so instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, we actually use what we call keys, right? So instead of assigning numbers to values, we're actually able to assign some kind of words or characters to identify those values. So in other words, I'm going to right now create a key. So this is going to be my key, right? This is my key, user agent. And then I'm going to put a colon. And the next thing is going to be the value. Okay, so that's what's happening here. User agent is the key. And then the value is going to be whatever this whole long string is. So that's going to go inside there. All right. Now I'm doing it in 2 lines just so you guys can see the whole situation, but you could definitely do this in 1 line. So you can do this. You can say header equals, and then you can do user agent, and then this whole line of code like that. So whichever looks prettier to you. If you want to do it in 2 lines like that, or if you want to do it in 1 line like this. Either way is fine. I'm going to leave it as 2. And then in order to pass it with your get, right, because we want to overwrite the default header, you just, you put header. That's what you say. You say header, and then you say equals, and you put, again, header. And what you notice is that this part is going to turn purple. That's what we call the named parameter, okay? It's a named parameter. It looks a little bit weird because you're saying header equals header, right? And it's like, why are we repeating ourselves? But that's just because I chose to call my data the same name as the parameter inside this get function. So technically, I can actually rename this part so they don't equal. So for example, I can call it UA, right? And that will still work. Does that make sense? Right? What I'm trying to say? It only says header equals headers because I chose a name that matches exactly the name parameter. But this part could be anything. Now, on the other hand, this part has to say header because that's actually the name of the parameter inside the get function. And in fact, when I, if I hold my mouse over it, you can see that it has a whole bunch of different parameters that it takes. And, yeah, it is what it is. So here, let me see if I can. There's a list of parameters it takes. What's the easiest way to show you guys? Oh, I know. You can do comma and then control space. There we go. So there is. No, I guess that doesn't work. I don't know, you guys. I don't know how to bring up a list. But another one is data. Another one is file. There's a whole bunch of things you can pass. But just trust me on this one. This is one of the main parameters. So you don't have to put spaces if you don't want to. You can keep it nice and lean if you so choose. Anyways, so here we took a user agent and we defined our own, and then we are going to pass it together with our original request. So now when I run this test in debug mode and I look at the response object, wait, what did I do? Why are you complaining? Hold on, you guys. I might be doing this wrong. No? Okay. Ooh, okay. I missed a letter. A typo, sorry about that. So response, here we can look inside our request, and now we can see that the request when we sent it in now doesn't have that whole Python situation happening. It contains the user agent that I supplied. So if you guys can see that, hopefully, you guys can see that it says user agent and then this string is being passed in. So you guys, I'm sorry, I said header, but it's actually headers. So header equals header. And I should know that, but I don't know, typo. Okay, so any questions? If some of you are thinking, Ellie, why does your header user agent matter so much? If anybody's thinking that, let me show you. Okay, this is why it matters. I'm actually going to go to Facebook. No, wait, hold on. Am I signed into Facebook? No, let's not go to Facebook. What's another good one for mobile? Maybe Wells Fargo? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Let's try it. So this is Wells Fargo for desktop, but if I, no, hold on. Firefox. I don't have a user agent switcher installed for my Google Chrome. So just bear with me a second. I don't usually use it. I only do it for class to show you guys how it works. wellsfargo.com. There we go, user agent switcher. So what happens is if I change that I'm passing, and if I pretend to be, for example, a mobile user agent, then when I request the same page, hopefully this works. See, it looks completely different. And the reason it looks completely different is now it's a responsive UI. So now it's actually optimized for a mobile device. So because I set my user agent to be a mobile browser, the server gave me completely different HTML. So when you're doing API automation, you actually want to be able to test both. You want to be able to test what happens when you make a request as a mobile device, or what happens when you make a request as a desktop device. You might want to test it as different browsers, because if your application behaves differently in different browsers, you might want to test what happens if you go from a Mac or from a Windows. We actually saw that last week, right? If we go to a website from a Mac, we get certain one file to be offered for us for download. If we go on a Windows, it's a different file that gets offered to us for download. So when you're doing API testing, you want to consider all those situations, right? And so you would actually have to change your user agent on your request in order to get all those situations examined, essentially. So let me just set my user agent back. And as you can see, as soon as I set it back, it goes back to the original website. So yes, okay. So hopefully now you guys understand the importance of user agent switcher. And if you have any questions, I'm looking at the questions now. So go ahead and ask. we are going to spend a little bit of time on those. Could you please show where to find user agent again? I am seeing only the calls. Yes, let me take you through that in a second. Can you go over how to find? Pretty much everybody's asking me exactly the same thing. So yeah, let me go through that again. All right, so one more time. Doesn't matter which URL you go to, any URL. So we went to Wells Fargo before. Let's go there again. So it's going to be wellsfargo.com, for example. I mean, you can go to Facebook, you can go to Google, doesn't matter. So once you have the web page open, go ahead and right click and say inspect. Now, I'm kind of, I guess, expecting to all of you have your developer tools enabled in your browser. If you do not, then go ahead and enable them, but you should be able to see this inspect option. And then once you go to the inspect option, usually it opens up an elements tab, but you actually want to click on network. Okay, so not sources, not console, network is what you want. Once you get to the network, if you don't have anything here, go ahead and refresh the page, or you can just wait a little bit. Usually something will pop up. And then once you see this, you just click. You click on any one of these requests. Now, sometimes you get a lot of stuff. See, I have a lot. So sometimes it helps to click on doc. There's a filter over here on the top. So I like to click on doc. That just kind of narrows down how much traffic you see. And then after you click on doc, any request, any one of them you can click on, and you should see the panel open up with like headers, preview, response, cookies, initiator, timing. So just go there, and then on the headers you would scroll down, and you'll be able to find request headers. And very bottom one is user agent. So yeah, not the most intuitive location, but I think once you do it a few times, you get you learn this really well. And again, because this class is for API automation, we go through this whole situation a lot. So you really, you learn to find things really quickly and how to figure out, how things look and what they are and what you need, what you don't need, what to pass, what to not pass. So yeah, we really get friendly with this guy, with this network tab. So was that good? Do you want me to do anything else on that one? Did that make sense? Hopefully. Nobody's responding, so I'm assuming that silence means yes, everything's good. Thank you. All right, here we go. Thank you. So here we go. Let's do WebDriver. Okay. So we're doing a sampling of everything the first 2 days. After that, we're not going to do this whole kind of like mess of everything in one day or in 2 days. We're going to do a little bit more concentrated effort on one thing and a concentrated effort on another thing. But because I wanted to kind of show you a little bit of everything, so you get some benefit from these 2 sessions. Let's jump to the next shiny, cool, awesome thing. So before we begin, we will need to download the Selenium package. You guys should be pro at this by this point. So go ahead and go to, again, your PyCharm preferences or your file settings, depending on which operating system you're on. So I'm on Mac, so Python preferences for me, or PyCharm preferences for me. And then you want to go to project and project interpreter. Now, again, you will not have as much stuff here as I do. Obviously, I use this all the time, so there's a lot of stuff here. But for you, it's just going to be a few things. And then after that, you're going to click on the plus sign. All right, so you're going to click on the plus sign. On Macs, it's on the bottom. On Windows, it's on the middle top-ish, right? So you're going to click on the plus sign, and then you're just going to type in Selenium. Now, as always, you're going to get many results that contain the Selenium keyword in the result, but you don't want any kind of bells and whistles. You just want plain old Selenium No dashes, no hyphens, no nothing, just Selenium. And it should be version 3 dot something, so 3.141, I believe. So 3.141 is what is apparently the latest version now. So go ahead and install that. So you're going to select it and click Install Package. Wait a couple minutes, or well, hopefully not minutes, seconds, and you'll be able to see the green banner that everything was installed successfully. You can close and press OK after that, and you should be good to go. Sorry, you guys, I decided to update some of my tools. Just bear with me for a second. Okay. So, before we proceed, let's create another test template. So on right-click test, I'm saying new, and I'm selecting Python file. So again, right-click on tests, new, select Python file. And this is going to be, again, a unit test. I mean, most things are not going to be unit tests at this point. And you want to give it a name. So just like in any other, development situation, for development, we have hello world. For WebDriver, we have valid login. So this is just going to be a login tests. So you can just call it login. And of the rite of passage, right? Any application you're ever going to automate using WebDriver, you're probably going to be implementing a login. So it's kind of like hello world of WebDriver. I get the result reference for header. Yeah, I forgot to put an S at the end. So just say headers equals header. Sorry about that. Here, let me show again. I totally on me. It's headers equals header, not header equals header. That's kicks and screams. Path to what? Sorry. Could you tell the path again? Mark, which path? Path to the interpreter, path to create the new file. To Selenium. Okay. So you have to, basically what we're doing is we're installing it. So you're gonna go, if you're on Windows, you're gonna go File, and excuse me, you're gonna go File, and over here, I mean, I'm on the Mac, so I didn't have the option, but on the Windows over here, you would have the settings. There's gonna be an option called settings. If you're on a Mac, you're gonna select preferences, okay? So File, settings, or PyCharm preferences, depending on your operating system. Either one, right? Either operating system, you'll still end up with this preferences window. And so you want to make sure you go to where it says project and then the name of your project, open it up and click on project interpreter. So project interpreter. Here, again, depending on your operating system, you will either have a plus sign on the right middle top or on the left bottom. And you just want to click on that plus sign and type in Selenium and install it that way. So just, Selenium. And it's the very first result. You just want to select it and click Install Package. That's pretty much it. Okay, this is going to be a little bit of a brain cooking. So you guys can kind of, hold on tight and don't let go. Hopefully by this point, you're familiar enough with this template that it's not going to throw you for a loop. I'm just going to very quickly modify these values, and then we're going to start adding things in order to create our first WebDriver test. Again, if none of this is immediately, make sense, that's fine. I wouldn't expect you to, to be able to grab it and learn it and run with it in like 1 hour. So this is a taste. And then obviously we get to do it so much in the upcoming weeks that by the end you know it as well as your, I don't know, phone number or social security number, whatever it is, pretty well. It becomes second nature, so you don't even have to think about it anymore. Anyways, so go ahead, let's test, change the names of these things. I'm gonna call this login, and then test, the very first one is gonna be valid login. And I'll immediately, put all my cards on the table. Homework for today, if you choose to do it, is going to be to create parameterized test for valid, or for not for valid, for a login. So in other words, you have to create a set of positive and negative valid, keep saying valid, positive and negative login tests, and then combine them into one test that is parameterized. You would have your @parameterized annotation, feed in your input data, and get your expected output data back for the login using WebDriver. So it will be combining the parameterized data-driven testing that we learned earlier today when we were, massaging our homework solution, and combining what we're learning right now as well. So keep that in mind. All right, let's keep going. So first thing we're going to need is we're going to need to import Selenium. So how's the best way to do it? Hold on, you guys. Let me think about this. No, let's do it this way. So we're going to say browser equals WebDriver. All right, so we're going to type in browser equals WebDriver. You know what? Let me make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. Okay, browser equals WebDriver. And then as soon as you type in WebDriver, that's going to get a red, squiggly line under it. If you hold your mouse over it, as I'm doing right now, you'll see the import this name option. All right, import this name option. If you don't see this, then go ahead and try clicking on it. All right, click on it. And then again, in a few seconds, you should see a red bulb, just as I'm doing right now. Okay, and then you will have the import this option under the red bulb. So whichever works for you, but you want one of those to appear. And then after you say import this name, you will have a list of options, or you may not. It depends on which, what you have installed, but I have a list of options. But what you want is you want the shortest one. So you want Selenium.WebDriver. You don't want any of the WebDriver Android or IE or Phantom.js stuff. You just want Selenium WebDriver option. Okay. And then as soon as you click on that, you will have a statement added that says from Selenium import WebDriver, and your red underline is going to go away. So you can proceed further after that. All right. So one more time. I'm going to show this one more time. You're going to type in browser equals WebDriver, and then you are going to hover over it or click on it, and you're going to select the import this name option. That will open up a little window for you, excuse me. It will open up a little window for you, and you want to select Selenium.WebDriver. That will add an import statement for you, and the red squiggly line will disappear. So hopefully everybody was successful. Now let's keep going further. So this is the name of the module, but we actually want to use a class from that module. So after we say WebDriver, we're going to put a dot and just wait a second, all right? After we wait a second, we will have a list open up, right? And we are looking for things that have capitals, right? So we want a capital. We don't want one of these lowercase ones, right? We don't want lowercase Chrome or lowercase Firefox. We want the capital letter Chrome or capital letter Firefox. I'll let you guys choose, your poison of choice, whatever browser you want to use, Firefox or Chrome. I prefer Chrome currently. I used to be an avid Firefox fan, but now Chrome owns most of the market, and I like to test with the thing that owns, the majority of the market. So I use Chrome nowadays, but if you want to use Firefox, nothing against it, go for it. Somebody asked me about Headless Browser. So Phantom.js would be a headless browser in this case, all right? So you can do that. Another way to do is the remote, but then you would have to set up Selenium grid. So yeah, your options are essentially headless Phantom.js or a specific browser such as Chrome, Firefox. I don't know if anybody still uses Opera, but if you are, you can do that. I really wouldn't recommend trying to use IE, even if you're on the Windows. It's a little bit icky. Plus, IE is actually being deprecated. Very soon, we're not going to have IE at all anymore. Actually, IE is now going to be Edge. So IE is being replaced by Edge. Okay, so I'm going to go with Chrome. So I'm going to double click on Chrome. Again, capital C is what we want, not lowercase. All right, so WebDriver.capital-C Chrome. And then after Chrome, you're going to put an opening round parenthesis. And then you're just going to wait for a second. So as soon as you open up one opening round parenthesis, you will see this little, documentation pop up. And it's going to show you all the different named parameters you can pass into these parentheses. So as you can see, it's actually highlighting for us the first name parameter, which is called Executable Path. All right. And it's even giving us a hint that it has to be a string and it has to point to Chrome driver. So it's actually giving us all the hints we possibly ever need. You can also provide some other parameters, as you guys can see. Some of them are called options, desired capabilities, Chrome options. This is very much advanced. So I don't cover it in this class. Just to kind of explain to you what those are. Right now, when we are creating our test, when we run it, the test is going to get executed with a clean incognito or private version of the browser. So in other words, it's as if you installed the browser for the very first time onto your computer, right? No history, no cookies, no add-ons, no plugins, no nothing. It's clean, as if you just purchased a new computer and you just installed browser on it for the first time. And it's going to do this for every single test. This is for, data integrity purposes. So you want to make sure that every test you run has exactly the same starting point. That way you can compare apples to apples if something does fail eventually, or or stops working for whatever reason. So if you don't want that though, if you actually want to run it with a browser that has a plugin installed, or has some kind of thing configured on it, or has some kind of style or mode set on it, then that's why you have all of these other options, such as Chrome options or desired capabilities, or just regular options. So, but very much advanced. This is not common, so I don't feel like it needs to be covered in this class. It's a very unusual situation. Okay, anyways, but the one we do want is called Executable Path. So go ahead and start typing EXE, and you don't even have to finish typing the whole thing. It will actually let you select from the drop-down menu. So you can just double-click on it after that and just leave it at that. Okay, so we're going to say browser equals WebDriver.Chrome for me, or Firefox for you. But in either case, it's still going to be Executable Path equals. Here's where things get a little bit tricky. All right, out of the box, WebDriver doesn't work with the browser. For the browser, for WebDriver to be able to drive, that's why it's called a driver, to drive the browser or to interact with the browser, it actually needs an extra executable helper, right? It needs an extra executable to be installed onto your system. So that's what the next step is going to be. Right now, we're going to go out and we're going to download that executable. Now, at the very beginning of last class, I had you create a browsers folder. I've kind of been using it as my playground to make copies of my code for you and call it doc. but I'm going to remove it right now because that's actually not its main purpose. We're actually going to put the browser executables into this folder. That's why it's called browsers, because this is where we're always going to go. So go ahead and clean out that folder if you already put some stuff in it. This is meant for the executables. And after that, if you chose to use Chrome, you are going to go and Google for Chrome driver, right? And if you're using Firefox, you are going to look for Gecko driver. So here we go. Let's go and do this together. So I'm going to look for Chrome driver. Let me close this. All right. So Chrome driver, and we're going to go to downloads. Here's what.
If I have it, if I have it in another project, can I share it somehow with the current?
Yeah,
one?
you can just provide the path to it. So if you know where it is in another project, you can either copy it into this one, or you don't even have to copy it. You can just provide an absolute path to it. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here's the tricky part, you guys. You need to make sure that you download the correct Chrome driver. So as you guys can see, they provide 3 different versions. Actually, if your browser is something earlier than that, you can go and look for other versions as well. But the versions need to agree. So you cannot download 85 if you have browser version 84, and vice versa. You cannot download 84 if your browser version is 85. So what you would need to do is you would actually need to look up your browser version. So on the Mac, it's under Chrome. You just say About. And in the Windows, it's under Help. And again, you just say About. So as you guys can see, mine is 83. All right, so mine is 83. So that means I cannot download 85 or 84. I need to download 83. And if I want to download 85, then I need to upgrade my browser to 85. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. We could use WebDriver Manager, but I'm old-fashioned and I like to do things the hard way. I'm old. I'm like a dinosaur. I've been around in this industry forever. I actually have been around when WebDriver just was born. Actually, not even WebDriver. Selenium. Those of you who were around. It used to be called Selenium. And I was around when they just created Selenium. Okay, so I'm going to go through the motions with you guys. I'm going to download it. I actually have multiple copies already, but for the fun of it. So once you click on that link, you actually get to choose which flavor you want. Unfortunately, this is not Smart UI, so it's not going to look at your user agent and just suggest one for you. You're going to have to do it yourself, but it's pretty simple. You're basically either a Windows, a Linux, or a Mac. Even if you're a Windows 64, you would still get Windows 32 because there's just no other Windows option. So go ahead and download it. It's very quick. It's tiny. It's only about 7 megs in size, so it should be pretty quick to download. Even if you have an atrocious slow connection, it should be very quick. And after that, the fun starts. So I want to make sure I show you this. So here is my downloads. Here is my zip. Okay, you guys see it? It says Chrome driver Mac 64 is zip. It is very important for you to unzip it. Windows is going to mess with you. All right, on the Windows, when you double click on your zip, it opens up a folder and you're like, hey, it's unzipped. But no, it's messing with you. You actually want to right click on it and say extract all. Okay, so on the Windows, you can't double click on the zip. You have to right click and say extract. All right, or at least some kind of combination of extract. If on the Windows you simply double click, it's not extracting. It's just kind of giving you a preview. But then you won't be able to do anything with those files. You'll try to copy them, it won't work. You'll try to drag them into your project, it won't work. You'll get frustrated, and then it's a big mess. So make sure that you extract the files. For a Mac, it's very easy. On a Mac, you just double click and it unzips automatically. And as you guys can see, for me, it says Chrome driver 2 because I already have a version of Chrome somewhere here also. Don't know where, but okay, somewhere. So after that, very easy. You just copy it. You're going to say copy, and then you're going to take it over to your PyCharm, and you're going to paste it into your browser's folder. So you're just going to say paste, and then say refactor, and it will paste it for you. So In the end, it should look something like this. When you unfold your browsers, you should have Chrome driver inside. Firefox is the same kind of thing, except instead of Chrome driver, you will use and look for Gecko driver. Gecko, G-E-C-K-O, Gecko driver. And you just go to releases. Again, you download a version that corresponds with your browser. Actually, for Gecko driver, it's not as important, if I'm completely honest. And then you download the correct GZ or zip. And it's a little bit larger than the other one. Sorry, it's downloading for me. That's why I'm staring at my screen. Same thing. Make sure you extract it. Don't double click on it if you're on the Windows. Extract it. After that, same situation. You copy it, and you right click on browsers and you say paste, and then you just say refactor. So in the end, it should look something like this. All right. So in your browser, you should either have Chrome driver or Gecko driver, or you can have both. It's fine. Okay. So, but you want to have at least one of them in your browsers folder under your project. Before anybody asks, it doesn't have to be called a browsers folder, but it certainly helps to call it a browsers folder because then you know that your browser executables are in the browsers folder. I've seen it called lib, I've seen it called execs, I've seen it called everything, but this is just what I prefer to call it. Okay, so hopefully once you downloaded this, right, it's there for you. Here is the, I guess, hopefully an easy part. So the easy part after you download it is to right click on it. So you just right click on it and then you say copy, all right, and path, all right. So you have several options. You have regular copy, copy path, absolute path, path from content root, all kinds of stuff, but you want copy path. You don't even need absolute path. You should be okay with regular path. All right, so copy path. And then you just take it over here and in quotes, has to be in quotes, you paste it. Okay, that totally didn't work. Hold on, one more time. I was showing for too long and lost my place. One more time, like that. You should end up with something that looks kind of ish like this, sort of ish. If you're on Windows, then you either need to make these doubles, okay, or you need to make them backwards, one of the two. It doesn't like single slashes on a Windows, because on the Windows, there's all kinds of shortcuts. It's like, well, I mean, you guys know some of them. So it's basically when you paste your path, either change the direction of slashes all to the other side or add doubles everywhere. One of those two should work. Depends on your operating system, on your Windows, on your Python, on your PyCharm, on everything. So it's a combination of all kinds of factors, but one of those two should work. Okie doke. How's everyone doing? Are you with me? I do. You know what, to be honest, I'm always confused on the forward slash versus a backward slash. So I don't remember. It's whatever the one that escapes. Try to do the right. I don't know. I don't remember. Well, did you put your Chrome driver inside a browsers folder? Because if you just put it under the project instead of the browsers folder, then it might not be copying it because you don't actually have browsers folder. Otherwise, I'm not sure why that would happen. Try, you know what? Try right click, copy, and path from content root. That might be why it's complaining. So try path from content root and then try pasting. How to add a, yes, okay, got it. How to add a file into the browser directory. Could I show this again? Absolutely. Yay, awesome, Victoria, love it. Okay, yes, let me show one more time how to add a file. Let's see, I'm gonna need another file. Here, we'll do this one. So it's just a copy and paste. So I'm just doing copy, any file, doesn't matter which one. And then when I go to my project, right, I right click on the folder I want to paste it into and I just say paste. So I'm not doing anything fancy. But after I say paste, it opens up this dialog for me. It says copy file. And here I'm actually able to provide a different name for the file when I paste it. So I'm actually able to rename it if I want to. If I don't want to rename it, I just say refactor and it will actually won't do anything, we'll just paste it. But yeah, I'm not doing anything funny or fancy. Okay, let's move on. We're almost there, you guys. Very close, almost there. So what did we just do? We downloaded that special executable that's going to allow our web driver to interact with our, in my case, Chrome browser. And this is why we called the variable that's going to contain a pointer to this special driver browser. Because essentially, anytime we want to do anything in the browser going forward, we're going to say browser dot, right? Because when we are asking somebody to do something for us, we first have to, we have to call them out, right? We have to refer to them. So in other words, I wouldn't be like, say something like, I have multiple kids. So I wouldn't be like, hey, pick up toys, right? I would actually say like, hey, for example, Bobby, pick up toys, right? I would say who. So I would say who and then what they need to do. Same thing here. I would say browser and then what the browser needs to do, all right? Or rather what needs to be done in the browser. So here we have a browser instance. Now, at the same time we say browser.chrome, what's actually going to happen is it's actually going to open up a browser for us. So even if we run the code the way it is right now, it will actually open up the browser for us and we'll just have an empty window. After the browser is open, we want to go to a URL where we're actually going to be performing actions. All right, so we actually want to go to a URL. So in this case, the URL I usually use is, hopefully it's working. I'm just going to check it, guys. So slow. That's not good. Why aren't you loading HRM? Okay. Sorry, just my internet is being weird all day today. Okay, so we loaded the page. Let me just check. I'm not giving you the URL yet because I actually want to make sure that the password works. Yes, it does. Okay. So let me give you the URL. I'm going to put it in the chat. Let me get back to you. 1 second. Let me paste this, and then I'll respond to that question. 1 second. This is the URL, you guys. I put it in the chat for GoToWebinar. All right, so I'm getting a couple people telling me that they're having problems on the Windows environment with their Chrome driver executable. I would try giving it the absolute path instead of relative path in that case. So what I had you guys do is do relative path, right? So relative meaning that doesn't start with the C or D drive. It doesn't start with a D drive. It's just relative to this project. But if you are, when you're trying to run your code, it gives you an error saying something along the lines of Chrome driver executable needs to be in path. I would try to provide the entire long path. So, the C:/ la 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 la, everything. And then when you paste that and you see the slashes are all weird, then just, do the doubles or switch them the other way around. Try that and let me know if that works. Alternatively, you could add the folder with your Chrome driver to path, but to be honest, I've actually tried that before. It also didn't work. Absolute path seems to be the one that works the best. So try that. If not that, then we're going to have to brainstorm together after the class. Okay, so where were we, you guys? Yes, okay. So I gave you the URL. And now what we're going to do is we are going to do our first WebDriver action. We are going to open up the URL. So this might look very familiar because remember that GET request that we did in order to get Google HTML? We're going to do exactly the same thing. Instead of saying requests.get, we're going to say browser. Oops, not letting me type. Browser.get. All right, that's what we're going to do. And then over here inside the get, we're going to put our URL. Again, single quotes or double quotes is fine. Regardless of which one you choose, it will still work. But this is what it's going to look like, browser.get. And in fact, I'll show you what happens when you run it. I set a breakpoint, so it will actually pause and we can see it. If you don't set a breakpoint, it's just going to go really fast, so you won't be able to see it. But I'm running it right now. Oh, see, it's also giving me problems as well. Yeah, apparently mine doesn't like the relative path either. I'm wondering if it might be something wrong with WebDriver. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the full path. So copy absolute path. And then highlight. So let me see if that works. Yeah. So I don't know what, I think you guys, there's a little bit of a going on where it doesn't let you use absolute path anymore. So try, I'm sorry, relative path anymore. So try the absolute path if the relative path is giving you problems. So you guys just saw me do that, right? I had relative path, it didn't work. I put absolute path and it worked beautifully. Same way to get it. You just right click and you say copy, but absolute path instead of copy path or path from content loop. So absolute path. Now, before anybody asks, no, this is not how I would do it in the real world, not in my job. In my job, I would actually make this into a variable, excuse me. But again, I do cover this in this class. Well, not in this session, but I do cover it in the course. So for now, this is fine. But as we move through the course, we will actually make optimizations to our code. And we will have a variable that gets set based on your operating system and the location of your project. So it will actually work on anybody's machine, not just mine. So this will only work on mine because it literally hard codes Ellie. But as we optimize this throughout the course, it will be optimized to the point where it will work anywhere. And I'll show you how to do that. Vlad, did I answer your question with the absolute path? Oh, okay, you're saying it does work for you. Okay. Well, like I said, it's supposed to work that way. I don't know why it doesn't work for some people, but apparently it doesn't work for me either. So usually it works. I think it's just some combination of something or other. Yeah. So okay, cool. And I'm glad to hear that for you it's also working now as well. Perfect. But for me it doesn't, so that's fine. It's whatever, right? As long as there's one way to work, that's all we want. That's all we really care about. Okay, you guys. So almost there, right? So as you guys can see, when it made a breakpoint for me, it actually did pop open Google Chrome for me, right? Here's my browser, and it opened up that URL for me. So that's what it is. But then notice this, like, look, this is a clean browser. So if you look at my regular browser, I have all kinds of plugins installed. See, I have this little Grammarly, and then I have customized control Google Chrome thing, and then I'm signed into Google, my Google account. So there's a lot of things going on. But the browser that it opened up to do the test, it's completely clean, right? So there's nothing. There's no plugins installed of any kind, nothing. Nothing is signed in. If you look inside bookmarks, there's no bookmarks, there's no history, except for the actual this page being loaded. There's nothing. It's completely clean, as I promised you, which actually is what we want. Let me go ahead and stop this guy. All right, so what we did is we were able to create a browser session. That's what this is. It's a browser session, and we were able to successfully open up a browser window with the given URL. Before we proceed, we probably want to immediately decide what it is we want to test. So let's go ahead and examine that. All right, I told you we're going to be doing a valid login. So of course, what does that entail? That entails, number one, entering text into the username field. Number two, entering text into the password field. And then, of course, clicking the login button. So for that, and you don't have to do this right now with me, I'll just show you. For that, we will be typing in admin, all lowercase, and then password, all lowercase, one word. So the word password is password, all lowercase, no any kind of tricks with numbers or special characters, just password. You're going to be doing login. And then after the page loads, after the page loads, what we want to do is we want to check something, right? We want to verify that we were able to log in. So if you're a human, how do you know you were able to log in? Okay, how would you as a human know? Well, first of all, you would know that your UI changed, right? But as a machine, you don't know that the UI changed. So as a machine, you would look for an element on the page that wasn't there before. Okay, that's how a machine knows that you logged in. So some of the things as a machine you might want to check is that the URL changed, right? So the URL actually is now, employee list, for example, or rather it ends with view employee list rather than what it was before. Or you might want to check that it says welcome admin, right? The welcome message. Or, you might want to check that it says the header employee information. So there's lots of things you could check to make sure you logged in, right? So just kind of keep that in mind, pick your favorite. I'll show you how to do the URL and the welcome admin. So does everybody understand where we're going with this? That's what our valid login is going to look like. It's going to be type, click, wait a couple seconds for the page to load, and then check that the URL changed and that the welcome admin message is being displayed. So let's go back to our code. Here we go. We said browser.get. We got our web page. The next step is to enter the username, right? That's the next step. So before we can enter a username, we need to find the element, or in other words, the input, right? The input field to enter that username. So we can't just enter a username anywhere. We have to enter it to a specific location. So go ahead and type in browser. and then I'm going to say dot, and we are going to quickly scroll through all the options available to us. There's quite a few. Besides get, we already used. There's also close. That's an important one to keep in mind. I'm actually going to ask you about this one a little bit later, but close actually closes a window. Now, close is not the same as exit, all right? So especially on the Mac, this is very apparent to users. For example, here I have my Skype, all right? I can close my Skype window, but you can still see that my Skype is active. So I did not exit Skype. I just closed the Skype window, but the actual session is still running. Same with the browser, right? With the browser, I can close the browser window, but the session will still be running. So this is specifically to close a window, not to exit out of the browser. Okay, let's do a couple more. Title. This is how you check the title of the page. Title of the page is what you see inside the tab. So if you want to check, if your test case is to actually check what the tab says, then you would use this title option. Add cookie. We're probably not going to use it as a beginner's class, but if you ever needed to test something like cookies being expired, or for security purposes, I'll give you an example. So you're testing a banking application. So in a banking application, when you log in, you're given a very short-lived cookie. That cookie lives about 5 minutes. If you do not make any kind of other actions on that domain, that banking domain, right, your cookie will expire. And so after 5 minutes, when you go back to that page and you try to click on anything on that page, on that banking page, you will actually get immediately logged out. It will not work. It will ask you to relog in. As long as you keep clicking around inside your banking application, that cookie will keeps getting refreshed, and so you can continue being logged in and navigate the web page. So if you're a QA trying to test something like that, you're not gonna start your test and have the test just pause for 5 minutes, because that's a very long 5 minutes, and waiting is expensive. We do not want our tests to be long. We want our tests to be as fast as possible. So instead of you waiting for 5 minutes for a cookie to expire, what you can do is you can actually take the cookie that's already there and modify it, okay? So you can actually get the cookie that's already inside your browser, see when the expiration date was set, subtract 4 minutes, for example, from the 5, right? So it was set to 5, subtract 4, or subtract whatever amount you want from it, and then set it again. So re-add it back in. It will overwrite the old cookie with the new cookie. It will be exactly the same cookie, except with a different earlier expiration. So instead of waiting for 5 minutes, you would wait for 5 seconds or 10 seconds, whatever it needs to wait for, right? Very quick wait, which will make your test very fast. So that's what this add cookie command is for. Things like back, refresh, forward, I think those make sense to everybody. It's just, the same thing you would do on a web page if you wanted to refresh or go back. Let's see. Command executor is something else we cover later on in the course. Create web element. This is, again, not a common thing to use. You actually can inject things into the web page. And then you can actually create elements on the web page if you so choose. Current URL, that's actually what we're going to be using right now to check that the URL updated. So if you call this function, or rather this property, if you call this property, it will return the URL of the page to you. And so you can actually perform an assert on it. Current window handle is something you guys don't really need to know about right now, but it's something we use in order to switch between windows. So when there's multiple windows open, you can switch between them. I'm going to skip through some of these because they're not really important, and go to the to the very interesting ones. So remember, before I opened up this list, I told you before we can enter text into a text field, we need to find it, right? So now we're getting to the find part, right? We have a whole list of find commands, right? We have a find element, and then we have find element by class name, CSS selector, ID, link text, name, partial link text, tag name, XPath, and then deja vu happens. All right, do you guys see that? Now, first trick question. Why are these things listed twice? Who has the eagle eye? Let's see, who's the eagle eye here? Why are things listed twice?
They're plural in there.
Exactly, there's that S, which is very hard to spot when you're new. Sorry, just reading through the question. So this one is find element, and this one is right? So the difference being is when you call one of these functions, you will get back one match, right? Even if there's multiples on the page, right? Even if there's multiples, you will still get one, the very first one from the top. The ones that are on the bottom, you will get all matches. So if you have multiple matches, you will get a list of matches. If you have one match, you will still get a list, but there will be just one item inside, all right? So bottom ones, they give you a list, top ones give you one item. There's an added kind of benefit to the bottom ones. If it doesn't find a match, it gives you back an empty list. The top ones, if it doesn't find a match, it throws an error. So if you are looking for an element on the page that could be there but could not be there, you're actually better off using the bottom ones and then checking the length of the response rather than using the top ones, because the top ones will fail, or you would have to wrap them into a try except block like we did earlier today with our tests, right? So it depends on what you're trying to do. Again, we actually do both of these in future in the course. We practice both, and I show you this, but since you know, I'm kind of explaining this sort of a little bit now, I figured I'll point it out for those of you who need it between now and then. Anyways, so we want to find the element first, and we have lots of different ways to find it. Now, some of these probably don't really make lots of sense, right? Like, what is this XPath business? What is this CSS selector business? Some of them do make sense. Link text, that's something everybody can understand, right? You guys all know what a link text is. You see a link, you grab the text, you use the text. Easy. Some of them are a little bit more kind of like, I wonder what that means. ID, class name, name. So those are actually the ones you're going to end up using the most, believe it or not. And I'm going to show you where to find these wonderful IDs, class names, and names for your object. So what I would like to have everybody do is go back to their URL, right? So go ahead and pop up in the browser and just manually paste the URL in. And then once you manually paste it in, you're going to use that inspect command again. So again, this is the same command I used, or the same actions I used to get to the network tab. But this time we're not going to go to the network tab. We're going to stay on the default tab that's going to open up. So here we go. I'm going to right click, and you can right click anywhere. I'm clicking here, but it doesn't matter where you right click. You can right click anywhere. So right click anywhere on the page. You're going to do inspect. Okay, like I said, anywhere. And then what you'll see is HTML, right? Most of you will see HTML out of the box. Like it just goes to the elements tab, which is HTML. And you'll see that lots of these tags have the ID inside them. So it says div ID wrapper, div ID content, div ID, div login, right? Div ID. So like lots of IDs. As you keep scrolling down, you'll see like tooltip holder ID and all kinds of interesting things. Footer ID. So that's what ID means, all right? So if I wanted to find any of these items, I could find them by ID. And then all I would have to do is just paste this value into that function, and we'll find it. Now, now that we know what an ID is, let's actually find the one we want. So we want to find ID for this username field, right? For this username field. If you click on this, I guess it's kind of like a rectangle with a arrow icon, right? That's on the top left of your developer tools. You click on it. So just, click on it. Then when you pull your mouse across the HTML page, it will highlight different things for you. And it will also highlight the HTML on the bottom that's associated with that item, with that element. So for example, right now I am hovering over the username field, and make sure you don't hover over the actual word username. Hover over the empty part of the username field. That way you'll get the right thing. If you hover over the username text, you're actually getting the hint. You don't want the hint. You want the field. So hover over the empty space inside the field, and then once it highlights properly, so the field is highlighted, you're gonna once again click. Now, when you click that second time, it's going to hold it steady. So that way you can move your mouse around and you're not going to lose your place. So I'm actually clicking down right now. You guys can't hear it, but I clicked down. And so now see, I'm moving my mouse around and the bottom doesn't change anymore. It's being held for me. So now I can go and I can actually look at my HTML and I can find out what the ID is. I can even copy it. So in this case, I really, truly encourage you guys to copy and paste. If you're not coming from a programming background, you might be tempted to type. Lots of folks right now are very good, at typing. They're very fast, and sometimes it seems faster to type something. I really discourage you from doing that. I cannot tell you how many times I've had people spend literally hours trying to figure out why their code doesn't work, only to find out that they mistyped one character or they miscapitalized one character. And then it's just wasted time. So I really do encourage you to copy and paste. So to copy it, you just double click on it right inside your developer tools window. So you just double click on it, and then you can do Command C, or you can right click and say copy, whichever, right? So Command C for Macs, Control C for Windows. You guys already know those shortcuts for copying, or you can just right click and say copy. But either way, I do really encourage you to copy things, because it's going to save you so much headache. Just do it. So here we go. We're going to say browser.find, and since we copied the ID, we're going to choose the find element by ID option. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're going to be using ID, you want to say you want to pick a function that actually looks by ID. So this is what it's going to look like. It's going to be browser.find element by ID, and then I copy the txt username and pasted it into quotes, into the function. So second part of this is to actually enter some text. So after I find the element, I'm going to put another dot, and then I'm going to look through my options again, right? So this is the name of the game is, if in doubt, put a dot. All right. So if you don't know what to do next, put a dot. It will give you a list of things, and you can pretty much, based on that list, figure out what probably is a good thing to do next. So that's the game we're going to play right now. I want you to go ahead and put a dot, and then go ahead and scroll through all of these options you have here, read through them, and let me know which one you think should be the next action we take. And you don't have to read through all the underscores. Just go to the point where the last one you'll find the option. In fact, you know what? I'll make your life easier for you. It's right now somewhere on the screen. So I have the option I'm looking for on the screen right now. So I'm not able to see your guys' questions and answers at the moment. So because this thing covers it, but here, hold on, let me do it this way. Okay. Yes. So I'm getting some answers now. Let me bring up the list again, because I promised to have it for you, and then I totally. So any other ones? I have 2 answers so far. 3. Yes. Yes. Right. Okay. So I got a few people to answer. So the command we're looking for is send keys. This one. So we are going to double click on that. And then, of course, in parentheses, we're going to type what it is we want to send over. So what should I be typing, you guys? Since I'm sending over the username, then I should be putting in the admin. So I vary. You don't have to do the success true, success false. When you do find the element, if it doesn't find that element, it's actually going to throw an exception at you immediately. So essentially, if you executed past that command, you're already golden. You don't need to do an assert on it. Yeah, essentially, if you did browser.find element by ID and it didn't blow up, you found it. Otherwise, yeah, you would get an error. You get an element not found exception. Okay, you guys, so this is how you enter text into the TXT username. I'm going to give you guys, let's say, 3 minutes to figure out on your own how to do exactly the same thing for password. So follow exactly the same steps. You are going to inspect, you are going to find the password field, you're going to grab the ID, you're going to add the function, and then you're going to send keys with the password. Okay, so go ahead and do that. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Go. So I'm being asked 2 questions. One is, what about waiting for elements to appear? Absolutely, there is an object for that. It's called WebDriver Wait, and absolutely 100%. It's one of my favorite things, and we do cover it in this course. Obviously not today because we only have about like, even if I go a little bit later than usual, like 20 minutes left. So yeah, absolutely we cover it, but for now we use sleep. And I usually, when I tell people to use sleep, I say you're only allowed to do it while I haven't taught you WebDriver Wait. Once you learn WebDriver Wait, you're absolutely not allowed under any circumstance to use it ever again, because it's a horrible, horrible, horrible way to go about. And I will be honest, if I ever ask a person during the interview to write me code, and instead of using WebDriver Wait, they use sleep, they automatically fail. Like, that's how bad it is. So the password is password, like password, like P-A here. Password. That's the password. Password is password. All right. Okay. I'm getting asked another question. All right. The other question is, hold on, where did I see it? I was asked in an interview how to count the number of inputs on the web page. Yes. So I'm being asked if I can use the plural for it. Yes, absolutely. In fact, you guys, this is not part of this, but this is how you would do it. You would say browser.find elements. Find elements is what you want. And then you're going to be doing by tag name, because they specifically asked you about inputs, and that's a tag name. So tag name, and then you would just say input. Right there. That will give you back a list. And even though we haven't learned this yet in class, I kind of brushed over it earlier. When you want to count how many items are in the list, you just use the len function. So you would just say len, like that. And so browser.find elements by tag name input will give you all the inputs on the web page. And then when you use the len function, it will give you a count. So it will actually give you something like 13 or 30 or I don't know, 45, whatever the number of them is. So that's how you would count. Or here, some of you will be like, no, don't erase. So here, I'll comment it out. To count the number of inputs on the page. Okay, let's keep going. So hopefully you guys already saw that I put an answer for password. I kind of jumped the gun there. But anyways, so here we have send admin, send keys, password. I'm not done torturing you. Remember, there's that last item where you have to click the login button. I'm pretty sure you guys can figure out how to do that one. So go ahead and do that right now. Here, I'll even take you partially part of the way there. So your first part will look almost exactly the same, except your ID will be different. The last part is, hold on, did I lose it? Yeah, last part is, one of these functions. Use your imagination. I'm pretty sure it's pretty clear to everybody. So again, just literally going to give you a minute and then we can move on. Yep, absolutely. You're right, Max. All right, minutes up. So it should look something like this: browser.find element singular by ID button login.click. Now, you guys, full disclosure, it's not always this easy. Not every element on every single web page that you're going to run into is going to have an ID. This is obviously a pre-cooked test case that I know is very easy for beginners because everything has an ID. But yes, you will run into situations where something doesn't have an ID, in which case you will be then, forced to use one of those other options that we saw in that list, right? So either tag name or CSS or XPath or link text or class name or whatnot. So you have all those options if an element doesn't have an ID. Furthermore, in this course, I do cover how to create locators, which are XPath and CSS selectors. So you basically have the power to find anything on the page, whether it has an ID, class name, or anything, whether it doesn't have anything at all. And we go pretty much in depth. Like, I show you a lot. Again, full disclosure, I obviously do interview folks a lot for my team or for any company that I work for. I was always on the interview panel, and I give you everything you possibly need to know in order to pass the interview when it comes to selectors. I also give you pretty much anything I think you need to know in order to pass any kind of WebDriver questions. I mean, we cover everything you possibly could ever want to know about WebDriver, anything you possibly would ever want to know about, API testing. Python, no, not really. Python is a much larger topic, so we cannot possibly cover everything and Python in 60 hours. So therefore, I do encourage you to study Python on your own and learn things on your own. But everything other than that, yes, absolutely. I'm being asked if I use CrowPath. You certainly could, but honestly, for me to create paths and locators is so easy. I can do it better than the tool, so I rather just do it myself. All right, let's keep going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a breakpoint, and I'm actually going to go through these so you can actually see it perform one step at a time. Here we go. I'm going to make this side by side just so you guys can kind of see. I have a small screen to work with, but bear with me. So here we are. I'm going to do a single step. See, it types admin, single step, types password, single step, does a login. We're inside. All right, so that's what we have right now for the test. Now, here's the thing. Right now, when you run your test, hold on. 1 second. No, that's not what I wanted. There we go. Right now, when you run your test, it doesn't clean up after itself. So we don't have setup or teardown. I'm aware of this. Let's finish the code, and then as the last piece, I will add setup and teardown so it looks nice and pretty before we all go home. Okay, so we have our button login and the click. Now, I don't know if you guys noticed or not, but after we log in, sometimes it takes a second for the next part to load. All right, so it takes a second, like 1, 2, a little bit under 2 seconds. So unfortunately, that does mean that we need to wait a bit. Okay, we need to wait a little bit. So we're gonna add that little wait after we click the login button, and it's pretty easy. You're just gonna say time.sleep, right? And you can put something like 3 seconds. It should be sufficient. Now, once you write time.sleep, you do need to import this package. So you want to import time, right? Not date time, time. So you're going to import time. And then what this is going to do is it's going to stop the Python process for 3 seconds. It's just going to stop it. It's a very blunt force kind of situation. It's not smart. It doesn't check whether it needs to still wait or not wait. Even though the page loaded in 1 second, it will still wait the whole 3 seconds. So that's why I feel like this is just a very bad thing to do. But because we haven't learned WebDriver wait yet, this is what we get to do today. Just, it is what it is. All right. And then finally, the icing on the cake. How do we check that it says welcome admin? How do we check the URL? All right. Well, the URL, I kind of already gave the answer to you, right? You guys remember? So how do I check the URL? How do I get it? You guys remember? I know some of you remembers. Come on, answer me.
Get URL.
Yeah, it's not get URL. It's just current URL. So you're going to say browser dot and current URL. Okay, as easy as that. So you say browser current URL and it gives you the URL of the page. All right. Now, what about the welcome message? Welcome message. All right. We're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to make this quick. I'm not going to torture you guys, but same concept. Before you can get the message, you need to find the element. So we're going to right-click on welcome admin, say inspect, right? And that's going to land us on this awesome web element right here. See, it says welcome admin inside it, and it has an ID, and the ID is welcome. So all you're going to do is you're going to say browser dot find element by ID, just like we did before. You're going to put welcome, or you're going to paste welcome instead of typing it. But and then after that, you're going to say dot. So it's not going to be send keys. It's not going to be click. It's actually going to be text, right? And actually, if you look at it very carefully, it shows you the little arrow. So like means returns. It returns text. That's what we want. We want the text from that web element, from that HTML tag. We want the text. So when you say dot text, that's what it's going to do. It's going to go find this element, and then whatever text it finds, it's going to give back to us and store it into the welcome message variable. So now once we do these 2 steps, browser.current URL and browser.find element by ID welcome.text, we now know the URL of this new page after we logged in, and we know the welcome message of this new page once we logged in. So we can do our asserts. Okay, so I'm going to do, let's see, I don't want to do assert equal. We've been using it a lot, so let's see what other one we can do. Let's do assert true. We haven't used assert true, so we can do assert true, self.assert true, and then we are going to say current URL, right? Or in other words, URL dot. And remember our very first class, we talked about I don't know why this is not working. Hold on, guys. Don't do this. This is just to help so I can show you guys the list. You don't need to do this part. Remember, okay, everybody hear me? Line 19, don't do it. I'm going to erase it. Just so it gives me all the options because it's not auto-suggesting for me. It's not auto-suggesting. Why? I don't know why it's not auto-suggesting, so you guys will just have to, trust me on it. So you're going to do URL dot ends with, okay? Ends with. This is what I was trying to do, you guys. So if you do, ABC or something, and you do dot, remember that function ends with that we learned, or we didn't learn, we talked about last class, ends with. So we don't want to check the whole URL. We just want to check that it ends with view employee list. All right, that's really what we care about. Because before we logged in, it did not end with view employee list, right? Before we logged in, it ended with something else. So we want to make sure that now the URL ends with, we're going to put view employee list, right? And so if it does, then it's going to return true. So then assert true will work because assert true and URL ends with view employee list is true. So the whole thing passes. Okay. The second assert we're going to add is going to be self.assert equal, like just like before. Unfortunately, you can't really make this fancier at this point. But we're going to do what we expect to see. So what do we expect to see as a welcome message? It should be welcome admin, right? That's what we expect to see. And then the actual welcome message is what we got back from the browser find element by ID function. So basically what we're saying is we're expecting to see welcome admin, and then we're checking what got stored inside welcome message, right? So we have those two asserts. That's it. I'm going to take it one step through and explain every single line one more time. And that's going to be the end, you guys. So get text is for Java. So yeah, if you're following this class along in Java instead of Python, then yes, absolutely. Get text is what you would use for Java. Ends with is not any kind of lib. It's actually a function of the string object. So as soon as you have some kind of string, ends with, it kind of just comes with it. All right, let's do this one thing at a time. All right, first line of code, right? This one. First line of code is responsible for popping open the browser. As you guys can see, I made one step, the browser opened up. Nothing in it though, completely empty. Okay, step 2, I'll do it this way. Step 2, browser.get followed by the URL. That is responsible for loading the URL. So, step, we'll see the URL load. All right, groovy. Next line, we are finding the username field and we are sending the username into that field, right? So here we go. You guys can't really see it, but I'll do this. Step, admin. Next line, same thing, except we're finding the password field and we're sending the password into it. Step, enter the password. Next line, again, we're finding the button login and we're clicking on it. And then we're giving it 3 seconds of wait, all right? Now, obviously, because I'm going one step at a time, I didn't actually need those 3 seconds, but if you run this test, you know, from end to end, you will need those 3 seconds. So, you know, this command is not necessary while you're debugging. It is necessary when you actually run the test. Okay, now we're in, right? You guys can see we're in. So the first thing we're going to do is, here you don't really need to see the browser anymore. So here, the next step is we're going to grab the URL. So this is the URL we got, right? It's the entire whole URL, but we're not looking at the whole URL. We're only interested in the last portion. So then the next step is for us to grab the welcome message. So again, that's the welcome message that we received on the web page, not to be confused with this, which is the expected result. I mean, obviously they do have to match. So that's why this one matches that. And then of course we do our asserts. Asserts is what essentially it's the testing inside the test. So we are testing that the URL ends with view employee list, which it does. And we are testing that welcome admin is the welcome message, which it is. And that's it. That's the end of the test. So the test has passed. Everybody rejoices. Everything is great. I promised before I let you go that I was going to fix my my test to actually be proper. So let me do that. I'm not going to talk too much about it right now because we're out of time, but we do with unit test have 2 additional functions that are available to us, and they are called def setup, right? You guys see it right here, def setup. And then also another function that is called def teardown. All right, again. So ignore when I say the word pass. It's just so that the interpreter doesn't throw errors. I will replace this later. This is just a placeholder. So as you guys can see, we have a function called setup. We have a function called teardown, and they do exactly what they sound like they're supposed to do. So setup is going to be used to prepare the test, right? So if I hold my mouse over it, you can see it's hook method for setting up the test fixture before exercising it. So this will be executed once per test. In other words, when you go home and you take this file and you implement another, I don't know, 5 tests, right, that are going to be negative, for example, then you would still have only one setup. You don't need to have multiples. And that setup will actually run 5 times, once per test inside the class block. Same with teardown. Teardown will run once per test. You don't need to implement one for each test. It will automatically work that way. The reason I want to do this before I send you guys off and to do your homework is specifically because I don't want you to duplicate code. So looking at our test, the test that we wrote, let me close this. Which portion do you think would need to happen? Which portion do you think of this code is actually part of the setup? Not part of the actual test, but part of the setup. What do you think? You can just give me the line numbers, by the way. You don't have to, give me the actual code. Which line numbers? Yeah, get to the page. Great. So I'm being told 15. Is that the only one? 15, the only line of code? 16 as well. I agree. So 15 and 16. Okay, so very easy. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these guys and I'm going to brutally, without remorse, I'm going to move them into setup. Okay? Now, obviously, once I yank them out, the test is going to be a little bit unhappy, but we're going to fix it. So I'm being asked a question. If we're talking about global setup, do we need the line 16? So the nature of your framework is that, when you're automating for your work, you're not really going to be automating multiple applications. You're going to be automating one application. So I would still say going to that URL would be part of the global setup. You definitely don't want to have that duplicated inside every single test. Even more so because if you intend to run these tests on multiple environments, which you do in the real world, you would actually want to run them on developers' local environments, in preview and staging, and pre-prod and prod, and anywhere your heart desires. You actually want this URL to only be hard-coded in one place. So yeah, you definitely want the get base URL to be global somewhere in one place, rather than inside every single test separately. Even if your company has multiple applications that you're automating, you would probably keep those in separate projects. So your one project will be dedicated to one application, one project to another application. You probably wouldn't bunch all of your applications into one project. That would be a little messy and hard to maintain. Okay, what were we doing? Yes, so we took these things here, and as soon as we did that, this thing became unhappy. Now, the reason it's unhappy is actually, you already know the reason it's unhappy is, remember I told you a rule that whenever something is created inside a block, it also gets destroyed inside that block, and other blocks cannot see it. So when we moved browser creation, meaning this part, to the setup function, test stopped seeing browser. So now as far as the test function is concerned, browser doesn't exist. So this is very easy to fix. All right, all we're going to do is we're going to store browser inside self. So over here in the setup, we're going to say self dot. All right, and we're going to do this twice. Self dot. All right, now throughout our test, we're going to be using browser a lot. So yes, you can definitely say self dot throughout the entire test. I don't like to do that. So instead, what I like to do is to unpack browser from self. So this is what it looks like. So essentially what I did here is I created a local browser variable, and the value from it I unpacked from self.browser. So here I packed it into self.browser, and here I unpacked it from self.browser. So here, because I did this, now the rest of my browser references are happy. They're not worried anymore. Yeah, so self is that, instance reference that we talked about last class. It's kind of like this in Java. Or another way to think of it is kind of like a pointer to your current your current process. Okay, so that's done. Now we have this teardown function, and we don't have anything to put inside it because we didn't actually create any code for it. So I challenge you to figure out and tell me right now, what do you think I should put inside the teardown function? What should I put? Remember what I said earlier. Anything we open, we really, really should close. Anything we start, we really, really should finish. Remember? Wink, wink, wink. Hint, hint, hint. Okay, we could close the browser, close enough, but there's an even better option. Somebody's saying exit. There's no exit function. I encourage you to say browser dot and look through your options. So do browser dot, look through your options. Close is a good guess. Is there a better guess? So we don't want to just close the window, right? We actually want to the whole session. Yes, good job, Max. What else? Who else knows the answer? We don't need to clear the cookies. As soon as we get out of this test, this browser session will get destroyed, and the new one that pops up is actually going to be clean again. It's going to be, spanking brand new, and nothing's going to be in it. Yes, Vlad, you are absolutely correct. I'm going to give it one more minute, and then I'll let you guys run. Okay. So, any other takers? No. So very, very easy. All we're going to do is we're going to say a self. Oops, excuse me. It's obviously time to stop. Self dot browser, and then we're going to say quit. Right? Quit is what they're looking for. Now, self dot browser dot close. Again, it was a very good guess. It's going to close the window, but unfortunately, it's not going to quit your browser session. It's a good guess because at the very least, you are, letting go of that memory that's being used to keep that browser window open. So it does clean your browser resources. But unfortunately, the session will also consume some resources, even if all the windows are closed. The upside, however, is that when you stop your execution of your suite, Python also cleans up after itself. So anything that you forgot to close, it will most of the time clean up, even if you forgot. It's just while you're running that it's dangerous to keep things open. And you might be saying, well, why? There's only one test, so whatever. Yeah, but now imagine that you've been automating for 3 months. How many tests you will have, right? Let's say that you have one, let's be very conservative. Let's say you write one test per day, right? But let's even say that. Usually it's more than that, right? You'll do anywhere between like 2 and maybe even 10 per day. You don't know, right? Depending on how complicated it is. But let's say 1 per day, right? After 3 months, you will have about 60 tests. And that means that when you run your entire suite, each one of those tests will open up at least one window. And if you don't clean up after yourself, that's 60 windows. Now, what you should ask yourself is, can your computer support having 60 windows open? Most computers won't. Most computers will slow down or crash. So yeah, you really do want to close the windows, and better yet, quit the session after every test. Okay. Performance testing? No, performance testing is on the application. When you're trying to crash the computer that you're actually running tests on, that's, first of all, that's stress testing. And second of all, you're stress testing the wrong thing. You're stressing your machine rather than the server that you're trying to actually, performance test. So don't do that. Don't do that. Be nice to your machine. Yes, important chat session. All right, you guys, that's it for today. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to, again, make a copy of this and upload it as a doc into Handouts. A little bit of a disclaimer, it does take a long while to convert the video from this class. So it's not because I don't want to upload it immediately. It's not that I try. It's literally took me 2 hours to convert the recording from this class into, MP4 last time. And then it took me a really long time to upload it just because it ends up being a very large file. So yeah, it's probably not going to happen tomorrow. It's probably going to be by Wednesday morning that I'm going to be able to share the link with the Portnoy School. But after that, they should have it. So you can definitely poke them and tell them to share it with you. Monday morning they'll have it. It's again, it's not just because I'm being being mean to you guys. I really am not. But I do work full time, so usually after work I'll sit down and I'll try to convert this video, and it takes a while, like the whole evening. So only by next morning I'm actually being like, I'm ready to be like, hey, the Portnoy School, here is the file that you can share with everybody, and then they post the link for you guys. So any other questions? Appium is not covered. I'm being asked, sorry, I have to read the questions. May I ask if Appium, Postman, JMeter are part of the class? If so, how many hours approximately will we dedicate to those tools? I was asked as part of this class to do WebDriver, API automation, and Python introduction. I wasn't asked to do JMeter. However, if we cover everything that we want to cover, I am certainly not against testing JMeter. So I will absolutely test it. Teach it. I absolutely teach it. And usually for JMeter, we need at least 2 days. Better yet, 3, really, to really grab it and understand it. For Postman, yeah, absolutely. We can cover Postman. That's easy. That's 30 minutes. Appium, we do not cover at all. Appium is for mobile automation, has nothing to do with API. So yeah, not in this course. Sorry.
And in terms of percentage-wise, we're still going to cover more for API automation, right?
Absolutely.
Versus UI.
No, absolutely. We, in fact,
Okay.
what I would like to have us end up with is a framework where we can set up our tests using API and then, open up the web page to the correct URL and do the testing and then, exit out and clean up using API. So we could actually use them interchangeably, which is what I do in my work, right? So I'm trying to get us to a point of what at work I would do. Obviously not as complex, because I have a very complex system that I use at work or test at work, but basic introduction concept. Yeah.
But JMeter might be not the option, right? If
It's
you're
just
not
a
going
matter
to
of
have a
how
time.
many hours. So full disclosure, originally this course wasn't going to be 60 hours, and it also wasn't going to include WebDriver, but because of the demand and the students and everybody, we had to change a little bit what's included in this course. So again, I am perfectly prepared to teach it if we can get that far. But if we want to be able to cover WebDriver and API automation and also Python, I'm just not sure if we're going to have time. I'm not against it. If we have time, I'm on it. Okay, I'll teach the heck out of it.
Okay, because when I was when at the time of signing up, I did not know that WebDriver will be a part of that. So, I mean, JMeter was there on the list,
Right.
The API. So I was assuming like you're gonna definitely go for that.
I think if we are gonna do JMeter, it's gonna be the last 2 classes, maybe 3, right? Last 2 classes.
Okay. All right.
So here, let me calculate this. 10 weeks, 40. I mean, I think it's definitely doable, right? If we can.
I agree. Like Selenium, I mean, it's pretty straightforward, and I agree. Like it's JMeter and like an API testing are much more valuable.
Yeah, I mean, if we can cover API in 2 classes, then we certainly should have time for JMeter. So let's just say yes. I don't see why we shouldn't get there. So. Bye, Victoria. Thank you so much for joining. I'm not sure, Mark, if that's a question. Are you asking about CAPTCHA and how to automate it? If we're going to be automating it? Is that the question? You're welcome, Lana. Absolutely. Have a good night. Bye, Vlad. Mark, so CAPTCHA was actually designed to prevent automation. Now, that's not to say that it cannot be automated, but unless you actually have access to the source code externally using WebDriver, you won't be able to. You actually need to be able to have access to the source code of the application, of the web application. Yeah, so no, we don't cover that in this class because I don't have source for the web application or for Capture for that matter. Sorry. Okay. Okay, yes. So we didn't cover this yet, but remember how I said that in Python you can suggest the data type to put in, like make a suggestion. This is also a kind of a little documentation, this arrow and none, as to what this function returns. So all this arrow none means is that this function does not return anything, okay? So nothing is being returned. So for example, for our calculate seconds, right? Our function, it returns either an int or a string, right? So for us, it would probably be something along the lines of, any, right? And then you have to import it, something like that, okay? And even if you make a mistake, you do something like this, then I wonder why it's not complaining. It should complain. Okay, I don't know why it's not complaining. Usually when you make a mistake, it actually asks you to fix it. Nope, maybe. Are you gonna, no. Okay, most of the time it asks to fix it. For some reason it's not asking to fix it, but yeah. So this is just a return type. It's for documentation purposes only. It actually doesn't enforce anything. It's not like I can't come here and say return, I don't know, ooga booga. You can, it's a suggestion, nice suggestion. You too, have a good night, Max. What is it, like a static void? No, it's not a lambda. It's not a lambda function. It's literally just a return type. It's like in Java, you would say, public string, name of the function. It's that string part. So this is the same thing. It's like, what am I planning to return? So Python doesn't know. It's actually unit test framework that takes care of this. So what happens is as soon as you inherit from unit test case, and whenever you say run, see, you're actually, remember how we're doing this? Where when we click on this arrow, it says run unit test, right? So it actually, unit test gets triggered and it goes through this class, this entire class, and it finds all the occurrences of the test functions, and it also finds all the occurrences of setup and teardown. There's also setup class, right? See, class, and then there's also setup or teardown class. So it finds all of those, and then based on its own rules, it has its own rules, it executes them. So it knows that to run setup once before every single test method, and it knows to run teardown once after every single test method. It's just something that unit test does. You are welcome. All right, I promised to you guys that I'm going to copy this and paste it into handouts. So hold on, let me just make sure it still works. I've been clicking around and sometimes I mess things up when I do that. Okay, so that didn't work. Okay. So just share the login file. If you guys want to grab that, it's there for you. But other than that, that's it, you guys. I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes so you guys can grab it if you need to, but it's a wrap. You are quite welcome, Alona. Hi, Barry. Thank you, too, for joining. Okay, you guys, that's that. I'm going to turn off the meeting now. If you didn't have a chance to grab any of the files and you're still here and you can still hear me, you can email me and I'll share those with you through email. Okay, take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.